Chapter 881. The light dispersed. Only the two of them were left gawking. Bufang and the old man exchanged looks, seeing the surprise in each other's eyes. Kid! The old man opened his mouth. The old man opened his mouth. Suddenly, his heart shook and a trace of wild joy appeared in his eyes. He looked around and discovered that many people had disappeared. The strongest demon king of the ruined prison, the netherworld woman, and Amethyst Elder were all gone. Only the little chef in front of him was left. That little chef was also a chef. The old man's eyes sparkled. He seemed to have figured something out. Previously, he had seen an egg and some rice on the stove, so he had cooked egg-fried rice. He had been trapped in this place for several thousand years, and it had been years since he had tasted good food. Even a bowl of egg-fried rice could make him happy. Was this egg-fried rice the test? Among so many people, only he and Bufang were chef. The others didn't know how to cook egg-fried rice. Was that why they were eliminated? The old man and Bufang looked at each other. They had both figured out the key point. They turned their heads at the same time, looking at the chef sitting cross-legged in the distance. At this moment, the chef had opened his eyes, indifferently looking at the two of them. "Congratulations on passing the first test," the chef said. His voice was as ethereal as an immortal's. The old man was bewildered. Then, he looked ecstatic. "Sure enough, there's a chance to transcend in this palace." The old man was so excited that his face turned slightly red. Transcend. Bufang was bewildered. Honestly, he wasn't interested in this so-called transcendence. At first, he was curious about this palace. But now, Bufang just wanted to return as soon as possible. He wanted Ni Yen to awaken her memory so she could help him brew the acheron of helplessness. The Heaven Chief Realm's qualification test. The second test. Please use the following ingredients to cook a dish. Those who pass will receive a qualification card. The chef's voice was still ethereal, drifting in Bufang and the old man's ears. Then, with a thud, a massive water vat emerged in front of them. The two of them widened their eyes and looked at the water jar in confusion. Whoosh! The sound of water splashing rang out. Then, a huge pincer appeared in front of Bufang. With a thought, Bufang stretched out his bandaged arm and bound the huge pincer. This was actually a blood lobster? According to the chef's words, could it be that the next dish he was going to cook was this blood lobster? Using blood lobster to cook, Bufang was a little confused. He suddenly remembered that he had caught a huge pile of blood lobsters in his system-dimensional bag. He wanted to find a time to cook all of them. But now, the second test was actually using these blood lobsters to cook. The old man was also dumbfounded. Blood lobsters to cook? His face quickly turned gloomy. Could blood lobsters be eaten? This thing was obviously not a good ingredient. The brain matter of the blood lobster was extremely poisonous. Unless it was cleaned, it would not be able to enter the stomach. Using this ingredient to make dishes was indeed a very difficult challenge. The old man scratched his head impatiently. His eyes were filled with unwillingness. Was he going to give up just like that? He wasn't willing. He turned his head to look at Bufang, who was sitting across from him. He found that Bufang's eyes were filled with excitement, as though he couldn't wait to cook these blood lobsters into a dish. This kid knew how to handle these ingredients? Impossible, he had been trapped here for several thousand years. He had tried to cook this blood lobster a few times, but it tasted really bad. It was hard to swallow. With his cooking skills, he couldn't make this blood lobster taste good. How could this little chef in front of him be so sure that he could do it? This little chef didn't know how terrifying the blood lobsters were. Wait until he started to cook, then he would know how terrifying they were. The corners of the old man's mouth rose, his eyes excited. It must be like that. He was ready to see Bufang make a fool of himself. However, while he was watching Bufang make a fool of himself, he also had to cook the blood lobsters. No matter what, it was the second test. If he couldn't pass it, he would never be able to transcend. It was also the qualification to enter the Heaven Chief realm that this chef had mentioned. The old man didn't know what the Heaven Chief realm was, but he believed that this Heaven Chief realm was definitely a realm that transcended the hidden dragon continent. Even the strongest demon king wanted to ask for a bowl of noodles from the chef of the Heaven Chief realm. It was enough to show the mysteriousness of the Heaven Chief realm. If he wanted to cook blood lobsters, then he would do it. Bufang couldn't wait any longer. The blood lobsters in the water tank weren't really big. At least, they were a little smaller than the blood lobsters that Bufang had caught, which made it easier to cook. Apparently, this was the result of the chef from the Heaven Chief realm's careful selection. Bufang turned to look at the old man, but he found that the old man had already started to process the blood lobsters. Eating blood lobsters was one thing, but cooking them was another. To make a good blood lobster, the degree of complexity wasn't small. No matter what, the blood lobsters were extremely toxic. If one wanted to eat them, they had to get rid of the toxic parts. That was the only way to cook them and make them taste better. A dragon roar echoed in his hand. Instantly, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufang's hand. As soon as the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared, the chef, who was sitting cross-legged quietly, opened his eyes one more time. His gaze fell on Bufang, which was deep and mysterious. Swish! A blood lobster struggled in Bufang's hand. The knife light flashed. Instantly, the blood lobster's head was cut off. With a swish, the filth in the blood lobster's head was expelled. After washing it with water, the knife hooked, and the lobster's line was pulled out. Every blood lobster was carefully processed by Bufang. This process was complicated, and it required a lot of time and energy. No matter what, Bufang had to ensure that the filth in the lobster's head was cleaned. If it wasn't cleaned, not only would the blood lobster reek, but it would also affect the taste. Of course, the most important thing was that it was toxic. Bufang had finished processing all the blood lobsters. Far from him, the old man had started to cook. Steam rose, and the aroma wafted. Bufang narrowed his eyes. That old man was actually planning to steam them. The blood lobsters were actually going to steam them. The corners of Bufang's mouth convulsed. It seemed that this old man hadn't grasped the true essence of blood lobsters. His hand shook, and portions of ingredients appeared in Bufang's hand. He placed them on the stove. The kitchen knife twirled, dancing in the air. Then, he began to process those ingredients. Those ingredients were all spicy and had a stimulating taste. After being minced by Bufang, he placed them on a plate. After preparing the ingredients, Bufang began to cook. Heating up the wok, lighting the fire, he poured in the oil. Waiting until the oil was boiling, the oil splashing everywhere, Bufang poured all the ingredients into the wok. In just a blink of an eye, white foam rose from the oil. Sizzling sounds echoed unceasingly, and a stimulating aroma arose. Bufang held the spatula, shaking it in the wok to spread the ingredients. He took out the abyssal chili sauce. How could he not have the abyssal chili sauce when cooking spicy blood lobsters? Scooping 2 spoonfuls of blood lobsters, he poured them into the wok. Instantly, the aroma diffused. The aroma was accompanied by a thick aroma. The abyssal chili sauce originally had a thick aroma, but it also had a stimulating taste. It was so stimulating that Bufang wanted to sneeze. After stir-frying the ingredients, Bufang poured all the processed blood lobsters into the wok. He began to stir-fry. The sizzling sounds echoed unceasingly. Underground, inside the palace, the few of them could no longer enter the ground. The strongest demon king had even used his brute force, but he couldn't step in. Hence, they didn't have much hope. They all sat cross-legged around the ground, looking at the pitch-black darkness. All of a sudden, their noses twitched. There was a pungent aroma rising from the ground. What a nice aroma! The strongest demon king's eyes widened, his heart a little excited. Yu's eyes brightened. She knew that Bufang was cooking something delicious again. Unfortunately, she wouldn't have a chance to eat it. Since she couldn't even enter the ground, how could she have a chance to eat it? Smelling the aroma in the air, you couldn't help but stick out her tongue to lick her lip. Her eyes were filled with anticipation. This aroma was really fragrant. The wok was filled with blood lobsters. Bufang continuously stirred the wok, making the blood lobsters taste good. From a distance, the old man's eyes widened. He had never thought that Bufang would choose such a cooking method. This kind of intense and stimulating cooking method would affect the taste of the blood lobsters. They would lose the original taste of lobster meat. The old man's eyes focused as he thought. Although the aroma was really thick, the thicker it was, the more excited the old man became. He grinned, and a tuft of hair on his head slightly fluttered. His hand suddenly pressed on the wok lid. Then, his hand flipped, lifting the lid. Steam rose, and the aroma rolled out. Inside the wok was a big porcelain plate, which was filled with scarlet blood lobsters. Their shells emitted a warm light. Drops of water flowed on the lobster shells, gently gliding, dripping on the plate. They were so sparkling and translucent. The old man's hand shook, and a sharp kitchen knife fell into his hand. The kitchen knife swept horizontally. The tip of the knife continuously cut the lobster shells, creating an inverted triangle shape, revealing the white, translucent lobster meat inside. A wave of lobster meat fragrance diffused from within. Boom, boom, boom. Far from them, Bufang continued to stir the wok. The blood lobsters in the wok were rolling rhythmically. Putting the wok down, Bufang opened the lid of the Iceheart jade urn wine, then poured the wine into the wok. After that, he continued to stir-fry. The scarlet blood lobsters began to stir under the light. Steam rolled, and the aroma filled the air. All of a sudden, Bufang's eyes focused. The wok shaking suddenly increased. Instantly, the blood lobsters flew out one after another. Bufang held the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. Knife light flashed. Each blood lobster's back was cut open. Swish, the blood lobsters fell, landing on the plate. They piled up one by one. Bright red, the spicy aroma shot up to the heavens. Bufang poured the soup in the wok over the blood lobsters. Sizzling sounds rose up into the sky. Spicy blood lobster. Done. Chapter 882. Thick aroma arose unceasingly from the darkness underground. The people standing in front of the cave looked at each other in dismay. That fragrance was a little enticing. Even the strongest demon king couldn't help but smack his lips as a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. Although he wasn't willing, facing this mysterious bronze palace, he had no solution. In this place, his cultivation base was sealed, so he could only use brute force. However, brute force couldn't break the invisible force that was blocking the entrance. Thus, he gave up. He could only sit there and sniff the aroma in the air. This spicy and fragrant aroma had the fresh smell of shrimp. People couldn't help but sniff the air. Aobai's face paled. The smell of fresh shrimps? The drunk shrimp ancestor wouldn't have been cooked by that human, right? It was possible. Besides the shrimp ancestor, what kind of shrimp could cook such a thick aroma? Aobai was shivering. Although the fragrance tickled his nostrils, it made him feel cold all over. That human! How terrifying was he? He felt sorry for his shrimp ancestor for a few seconds. Of course, it was just his guess. He didn't know what was happening underground. The old man rolled his eyes, looking at Bufang's steaming red blood lobster. The spicy aroma in the air caused him to squint his eyes involuntarily. This kid's cooking skills aren't bad. This aroma is really fragrant. What a pity. The spicy taste is too thick. The chili sauce has completely covered the fresh taste of the shrimp. The old man reached out his hand, rubbing the tuft of white hair on his head. He grinned, looking regretful. However, there was also a hint of joy in his expression. He was going to win the second round. As long as he could win, he would have a chance to transcend. He had been sealed in this damn place for several thousand years. Wasn't it to transcend? Today, his chance had come, but he was actually a little bit excited and worried. The chef sitting in the middle of the kitchen had an incomparably deep look. If he looked at him, he would be sucked in. The cooking is over. Hurry up and announce the winner. I want to transcend. The old man's eyes were filled with excitement. The chef's eyes didn't move, just looking at him indifferently. There are only 2 rounds of the Heaven Chief Realm selection test. You have already passed the first round. In the second round, only one of you will be able to obtain the token to enter the Heaven Chief Realm. The chef's voice was as ethereal as an immortal's, reverberating in the ears of Bufang and the old man. I know. Hurry up and taste the dish I'm cooking. Quick. The old man could not wait any longer. His eyes were filled with excitement. He felt that the outcome of this battle was already decided. Based on his many years of cooking experience, although Bufang's spicy blood lobster had a rich fragrance, it had lost the original taste of the blood lobster. Therefore, he was not the slightest bit worried. The old man carried his dish and walked over to the chef with an excited look on his face. Stop right there, rumble! A thunderous rumble resounded. In the next moment, the old man's body suddenly trembled. He felt a supreme pressure descend upon him, causing him to be unable to move. His heart shivering, the old man hurried back to his stove. Bufang clasped his hands. He didn't mind it at all. Judging the dish? Bufang looked at him indifferently. His calm eyes gazed at the chef in the distance. Coincidentally, the chef's eyes also turned to him. His eyes were deep and mocking. Bufang's heart shivered. His pores shrank. He felt as though the chef had seen through him with just a glance. Now we'll judge your dish. The one who will taste it will arrive in 3 seconds. The chef's voice was still so faint. Bufang and the old man were bewildered. Then their eyes shrank. Rumble! Rumble! In the void a crack appeared. It was the sound of something being torn apart. The old man's eyes were filled with excitement. The judge had come? The void was torn apart. A petite figure walked out with cat-like steps, twisting his doggy butt. Bufang was bewildered when he saw that figure. The old man was also dumbstruck when he saw that figure. What was going on? The judge of the dish was actually a dog? Was the food he cooked for a dog like this to eat? After the initial shock, Bufang couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He was a little speechless. It was that lazy dog. He had never thought that the one who came to taste his dish would be the lazy dog in the Valley of Gluttony. How could that dog have such a sharp nose? How did he know there would be good food here? Lord Go walked out with his enchanting cat-like step. Slowly, he landed on the ground. His body shook as he yawned. His doggy eyes lazily scanned around. Eventually, his gaze landed on Bufang. Hey Bufang, kid. What a coincidence. You're here too. Lord Go grunted. Bufang's face was emotionless as he looked at the lazy dog. The old man's mouth twitched. My God. This dog can talk. More importantly, this King dog seemed to know the little chef standing next to him. This immediately made him a little nervous again. If they knew each other, the judge wouldn't be fair. Lord Go didn't even bother to look at the old man. His eyes landed on the chef sitting cross-legged in the distance. At this moment, Lord Dog's eyes became sharp. His gaze was incomparably sharp. TSK, TSK, TSK. A wisp of immortal energy to create a clone. The people from the Heaven Chief realm still like to show off. Lord Go cocked his doggy mouth, speaking casually. The chef's eyes were deep and profound. He looked at Lord Go, his face meticulous. With your identity, you're qualified to be the judge of the Heaven Chief Realm's candidate. The chef was as ethereal as an immortal. All of a sudden, the void tore again. A moment later, 2 figures walked out of it. The old man's eyes widened once again as he stared at the sky in bewilderment. There was an incomparably handsome young man floating in the air, and behind him was a beautiful woman with purple hair. Are these 2 also referees? That was fair. If that dog knew the little chef, the judge wouldn't be good for him. Of course, he wouldn't accept it. Thus, when he saw the two of them, he looked as though he had seen his savior. His wrinkled face beamed with a smile. However, shortly after his smile froze. "Ah-ha-ha! It smells King good. It's the smell of the abyss. Owner Boo, you secretly cooked something good behind eyes back again." Hades Era narrowed his eyes. He flipped his hair, covering half of his face with one hand as he laughed crazily at Bufang. Bufang looked at Hades Era, rolling his eyes. Why did this clown come here? Saint Daughter Ziyun, who was following Hades Era, was a little nervous. She looked around, and when she found that they were in a kitchen, she was a little dumbfounded. She thought Brother Ha was going to take her somewhere, but it turned out to be a kitchen. Sure enough, Brother Ha hadn't changed his gluttonous nature. Hades Era and Saint Daughter Ziyun landed, smiling at Bufang. The old man looked as though he had just seen a dog. What the hell? The people who judged the dishes were all related to this little chef. Could it be that this little chef is your illegitimate child, Big Boss? You can't bully people like that. When Hades Era saw Lord Go, his mouth twitched, and he gave him a sidelong glance. "Mangy dog, why are you here? Your nose is really sharp." Lord Go snorted, rolling his eyes at Hades Era. "That idiot. Oh, so this is the legendary person from the immortal cooking realm? The Bronze Palace has the qualification to enter the Heaven Chief realm. I heard that your dishes are really good." When Nether King Ha saw the chef, he arched his brows. "Come, show I your skills. Make me a spicy strip first." Bufang's mouth twitched. Lord Go was speechless. Saint Daughter Ziyun covered her face with both hands. This clown wasn't the Brother Ha she knew. The chef wasn't angry. He just looked at her indifferently. "Lord of the Netherworld, your identity is enough to be the judge of the dishes this time. Those who are not involved, please leave now." "You can leave now," the chef said casually. A moment later, a buzzing sound came. Saint Daughter Ziyun was bewildered. A moment later, darkness appeared in front of her. A light dot emerged in the darkness, which she was chasing. The light dot grew bigger and bigger, eventually turning into a blazing light. When she came back to her senses, she found that she was already in another place. There were many people around. Gazes after gazes fell on her, causing her to be slightly dazed. "Ziyun?" Amethyst Elder was bewildered, looking at his daughter being expelled from the underground. What was going on? Wasn't Ziyun supposed to stay in the Valley of Gluttony? Why was she here? Was he hallucinating? Saint Daughter Ziyun was petrified when she heard the voice. Turning around, she saw Amethyst Elder, his face filled with shock. "Dad? Now, let's judge their dishes," the chef from the Heaven Chief realm said. "No. It's not fair," the old man bellowed, his eyes filled with unwillingness. He really couldn't accept it. That handsome young man and that dog both knew Bufang. He seriously doubted the fairness of this judge. "I want to change the person to taste my dish. Otherwise, I won't accept this competition," the old man screamed. Bufang was a little bewildered, looking at the old man suspiciously. The chef didn't say anything. Lord Go and Hades Era also looked at the old man playfully. A moment later, with a rumble, Hades Era appeared by the old man, placing his hand on the old man's shoulder. "You old man! What did you just say? Were you doubting this king's impartiality just now?" Hades said casually. Boom! A torrential wave of nether energy shot out from Hades Era's body. The old man opened his mouth to say something, but Hades Era was smiling at him. The old man's breathing became faster. That young man could use his cultivation base in this damn place? Wasn't this bullying? Lord Go indifferently looked at the old man, snorting. He raised his exquisite doggy paw and gently patted it. Boom! The incomparably firm bronze floor shook violently. A moment later, a dog paw print appeared on it. "I heard that you doubt Lord Go's fairness? Do you want Lord Go to give you a loving touch?" Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice echoed. The old man's body stiffened. This dog. Is he a king monster? Then, a man and a dog began to walk toward Bufang and the old man's dishes. What a joke! You taste that old man's dish first. Lord Go, I want to taste Bufang's dish first. It's shrimp. Lord Go hates shrimp the most. It's too troublesome. Lord Go strode with elegant cat-like steps, twisting his dog, but as he muttered to himself, walking toward Bufang's dish. That bowl of spicy blood lobster, which had a pungent spicy smell and aroma, immediately attracted Lord Go's eyes. Lord Go stuck out his tongue, inhaling and exhaling for a while. Honestly, Lord Go hates shrimp. I just want to taste one. Chapter 883. The Lord Go said that he didn't like to eat lobsters. Thus, as a judge, he would only eat one lobster. He spoke in all sincerity, but the way he stuck out his tongue and drooled made people feel like he was lying through his teeth. At least that was what Bufang thought. It should be known that the taste of the spicy blood lobster was really wonderful. Even a chef like Bufang wanted to taste the blood lobster, which tasted really good. However, before that, he had to see the Lord Go's evaluation of this dish. The Lord Go stuck out his tongue, wagging his tail as he stood in front of the bowl full of blood lobsters. The blood lobsters were steaming hot. Each one was red and boiling hot, covered with oil. Together with the gravy that Bufang had poured on them, they looked even more delicious. The Lord Go's nose moved forward, sniffing. Instantly, his nostrils flared, letting out a fierce hum. His eyes squinted, and the fur on his body seemed to be about to explode. That spicy taste was too sour and refreshing. The Lord Go shook his body. Then, his exquisite dog paw waved. Instantly, a blood lobster flew out of the bowl. Lord Dog stared at the blood lobster for a long time. Then, it opened its mouth. With a squeak, it swallowed the whole lobster, including the shell and the meat, into its mouth. Lord Dog's mouth was filled with the blood lobster. The old man squinted his eyes from a distance. Compared to his dish, Bufang's dish was really too rough. No matter if it was the unpeeled lobster shell or the suppressed fresh taste, they all made this dish lose a lot of point. On the other hand, his steamed blood lobster, before steaming, he would carefully peel off the shell of the prawn. He did not peel off the entire shell. He only cut off the shell on the back, revealing the white and tender prawn meat inside. The prawn meat seemed to be trembling as steam rose from it, accompanied by a fragrance. It was especially enticing. He had studied this dish for thousands of years. After all, he had eaten blood lobsters countless times in those thousands of years. This was the only way to eat blood lobsters perfectly. Hades' era was somewhat dissatisfied with Lord Go's decision. He was very confident in Bufang's dishes. After all, he was Owner Bu, the Owner Bu who could make spicy strip. From the spicy blood lobster, he even tasted a bit of the spicy strip. He felt that he should really like this dish from Owner Bu. However, he did not get into a deadlock with the mangy dog. After all, he knew that the dog did not like to eat such a complicated dish like prawns. Therefore, he could finish eating the old man's dishes and then savor Owner Bu's dishes. Holding a pair of chopsticks, Hades' era walked around the old man's dish. One had to admit that this dish was very artistic. It was sparkling and translucent like jade, and the shrimp meat was so white and tender that it seemed like water was about to drip out. After being steamed, the shrimp shell had a very cool hue. The shrimp head had been processed, and the toxic substances inside had all been removed. Thus, the shrimp's smell was no longer stinky. Quite the contrary, it had a sweet aroma. Reaching out his chopsticks, he touched the tender shrimp meat. The shrimp meat was sparkling and translucent, as if it was elastic. When the chopsticks touched it, the juice spilled out. The juice slid down the shrimp meat, and the sweet aroma became even thicker. Picking up a piece of shrimp meat, Hades' era's eyes couldn't help but brighten. Although this old man looked like he deserved a beating, he felt that the dishes he cooked weren't bad. Putting the tender shrimp meat into his mouth, Bufang slowly chewed. Hades slowly chewed. The sweet and tender shrimp meat moved in his mouth. When his teeth closed, the tender feeling of his teeth rubbing against the shrimp meat made Hades' hair stand on end. The sweet juice flowed out, soaking his tongue. The sweet taste spread instantly. With a slurping sound, the shrimp meat fell into his mouth, flowing down his throat and into his stomach. Not bad. Old man, your cooking skills aren't bad. Hades' was surprised. He didn't think that the shrimp meat would taste so good. Picking up another piece of prawn meat and putting it in his mouth, Nether King Ha's brows twitched. The old man's steamed blood lobster could calm people's minds, and they wouldn't feel restless. It gave people a feeling of nobility and elegance. Nether King Ha grabbed a prawn, putting his mouth on it as he began to suck in air. With a slurping sound, the shrimp meat entered his mouth. Along with the sweet taste, Hades' eyes brightened. Delicious. Hades praised. It was really delicious. Although it wasn't as good as Bufang's spicy strip, it wasn't bad at all. The old man's face was about to bloom with a smile. His wrinkles piled up as if they were about to jump. If it's good, you should eat more. Later, just give me a good comment. The old man rubbed his hands, smiling contentedly. Hades' nodded. Holding a shrimp, he walked toward Bufang's spicy blood lobster. Let me taste Bufang young man's dish first, the Nether King said vaguely. However, as soon as he reached Bufang's dish, his eyes opened wide. What are you doing? Nether King Ha let out an inhuman roar. Mangy dog, didn't you say you would only eat one? You King only have one? I really believe in you, mangy dog. Hades' was flustered and exasperated. Not far from him, Lord Go lay on the ground, cracking his oily mouth and eating the blood lobster. The ground was full of broken lobster shells. The lobster meat inside had all fallen into Lord Go's mouth. At the same time, Bufang was sitting at the side, eating until his mouth was red. He looked so excited. Bufang ate the blood lobster skillfully, looking like moving clouds and flowing water. He single-handedly grabbed a blood lobster. The blood lobster's pincers were shaking. Then, he pinched the giant lobster's head, twisting it hard. At the moment he twisted it, the fragrant and spicy gravy flowed from the lobster's head. This gravy was really delicious. Bufang opened his mouth, sucking all of the gravy into his mouth. The sour and spicy taste, together with the lobster's fragrance, surged into his mouth. Bufang's eyes widened, and they were filled with joy. He twisted the lobster's head. After sucking the gravy inside, he placed the head aside. Although the lobster's head had been processed, removing some poisonous parts, the taste of the lobster's head was actually more delicious than the gravy. Bufang would not waste his time eating the lobster's head. He grabbed the lobster's shell. Bufang had opened the back of the blood lobster. The so-called back opening was to use a kitchen knife to cut the lobster's shell in the middle, making the gravy soak inside, which would add more flavor to the lobster meat. Both of his hands rose, grabbing the two sides of the lobster's shell, peeling it open. Crack! The rosy lobster meat was exposed to the air. Steam rose from the lobster meat. It was different from the old man's white lobster meat. This time, Bufang's lobster meat had bright red lines, which was the sign of the spicy taste. Bufang opened his mouth, shoving all of the lobster meat into his mouth. That chef had picked these blood lobsters. Although they were much smaller than the ones Bufang had caught, each blood lobster was as big as a fist, not including the pincers. Bufang's mouth was stuffed. While he was chewing, the spicy taste surged. Fragrant, spicy, numb, and refreshing. At this moment, all kinds of flavors burst out. Bufang chewed the scalding lobster meat, his face a little red from the spicy taste. He swallowed the prawn meat with a gulp, then opened his mouth and exhaled, causing hot air to come out. So refreshing. The blood lobster with the abyssal chili sauce was really delicious. While Bufang's mouth was stuffed with lobster meat, he reached out his hand to grab another blood lobster. Following the previous steps, he began to eat. Twisting the lobster head, he began to suck the spicy gravy inside, letting the spicy taste spread in his mouth. His pores opened and his lips reddened. Compared to Bufang, the way Lord Go ate the lobster was much simpler. First, he bit the lobster head. Then, he started to reject the lobster head. Crunching sounds echoed in his mouth, and the gravy inside instantly spread in his mouth. Actually, the lobster head was the most delicious part of the blood lobster. According to individual preferences, some liked to eat it and some didn't. Some liked to eat lobster meat and some liked to eat lobster head. Thus, Bufang liked to eat lobster meat, and Lord Go liked to bite the lobster head. After the lobster head was bitten, the taste inside entered his mouth. After spitting out the residue, Lord Go began to eat the meat on the back of the lobster. As the lobster meat entered his mouth, the spicy taste made Lord Go squint his eyes. Snort, snort, Lord Go ate happily. He had already forgotten about the promise of one lobster. Lord Go didn't like to eat lobsters? Bufang looked at Lord Go, who was eating happily. The corners of his mouth rose. It was just that he hadn't met the blood lobster he made. Hades Era's eyes widened when he saw that. Looking at the blood lobsters on the plate decreasing at a speed naked eyes could observe, Hades Era felt so heartache that his teeth hurt. Damn it! The blood lobsters that could make this mangy dog eat so happily were absolutely delicious. Moreover, the spicy taste was still spreading, which made Hades Era's gluttonous worm even more excited. Let go of that lobster! Hades Era rolled his eyes, shouting at Bufang. He threw away the steamed lobster in his hand, dashing toward Bufang's blood lobster. Bufang's brows arched. Looking at Hades Era dashing over like a savage beast, he didn't say anything, turning his lobster head to eat the lobster meat. His movements were smooth. The spicy lobster meat entered his mouth, making Bufang's pores open. It was really delicious. The spicy taste filled the air. The abyssal chili sauce had brought out the spiciness to the fullest. Hades Era dashed toward the blood lobster. Looking at the remaining 2 blood lobsters in the bowl, his eyes opened wide. All of a sudden, a furry, exquisite dog paw extended from the side, grabbing a blood lobster and shoving it into its mouth. The mouth closed. Crack! The lobster head was bitten off, and the aroma filled the air. Hades Era gawked, dropping his jaw. Then, he was enraged. Damn mangy dog, where's your bottom line? Where's your face? There were only 2 lobsters left, and one of them was snatched away under his eyes. What a dog! Hades's heart was dripping blood. Looking at Bufang, who was reaching his hand toward the last blood lobster, Bufang's eyes couldn't move. His speed seemed to break space. With a ripping sound, he caught the last blood lobster in his hand. The steaming, aromatic blood lobster, in Hades Era's eyes, was like an exquisite work of art. His nose moved forward, sniffing. The smell of the abyssal chili sauce diffused. It was the familiar smell of the spicy strip. Oh, spicy strip lobster. So delicious. Hades Era's eyes blurred. He copied Bufang's method, twisting the lobster head. At the moment he twisted it, the soup splashed, the spicy taste rolled out. Hades's mouth moved forward, sucking. In the next moment, his entire body began to tremble. Chapter 884. Sucking, the delicious gravy flowed along the shell of the lobster's head into his mouth. It was as if there was a thin membrane covering his tongue. It was scalding hot and fragrant, causing all the pores on his body to shrink in an instant. Hades Era's atoms apple-bobbed. His face showed that he was enjoying the taste. He squinted, his tongue moving around his lips. The spicy taste stimulated his taste buds. That delicious feeling had a familiar taste. It was the taste of the spicy strip. He learned the way Bufang ate the lobster, sucking the lobster's head for a while. After licking the lobster's head clean, he began to deal with the meat on the lobster's back. The lobster's back was ripped open by Bufang, and the hard lobster shell on its back was torn open. Nether King Ha's hands pulled, pushing the lobster shell to the sides. Instantly, accompanied by a cracking sound, hot steam rose. The red and white lobster meat emerged from the lobster's back. The jade-like lobster meat completely mesmerized Hades' eyes. This lobster meat smells so good. Hades' saliva almost dripped from his mouth. He stared at the fresh lobster meat, his nose uncontrollably twitching. Compared to the old man's steamed blood lobster, this young man Bufang's spicy blood lobster was more delicious. Moreover, it was different from what the old man had said, saying that the fresh lobster's taste would be washed away by the thick spiciness. This time, Bufang's spicy blood lobster had a thick taste. It was fragrant and spicy, but it wouldn't wash away the original taste of the lobster. It was really a wonderful dish. Hades' wanted to cry. From the taste of the blood lobster, he tasted the taste of the spicy strip. Not only the spicy strip, but it was even more impressive than the spicy strip. Hades' felt that he had to fall in love with someone else. Perhaps from the moment he bit the lobster meat, he was poisoned by the spicy blood lobster. He was completely captivated by the spicy blood lobster. Slurp, slurp, gulp. Hades' stretched his neck and swallowed the delicious blood lobster meat in his mouth. In the next moment, he let out a long breath. Her face was filled with happiness. After a long time, he opened his eyes and they were moist. That was the feeling of being moved, the feeling of being moved after eating a delicious dish. This is too delicious. Hades shook his head in an intoxicated manner. Suddenly, his body suddenly stiffened. Then, he shifted his gaze and stared at Bufang and Lord Go. You actually ate so many spicy blood lobsters. You only left one for I. Where is your conscience? Hades' was infuriated. He felt as though his little heart had been slapped by the Lord Go's exquisite dog paw. The pain was heart-wrenching. Bufang glanced at Hades' indifferently. That look made Hades' not dare to utter a fart. Alright, you're a chef. You're awesome. I'm going to deal with that mangy dog. Then, Nether King Ha's eyes became incomparably sharp as he stared at the lazy dog lying on the ground leisurely. You mangy dog. Today you've eaten a few blood lobsters. I will not live under the same sky with you. Hades' shouted domineeringly. He was afraid that the air would suddenly become quiet. No one replied to him. Bufang looked at him with an emotionless face. The old man was dumbstruck. The chef from the Heaven Chief realm didn't move an inch. Lord Go grunted, shaking his dog tail, rolling his eyes at Hades' This clown. I will risk my life with you. Give me back my blood lobsters. Hades' was so angry that he went crazy. He clenched his fists, making cracking sounds. However, Lord Go still didn't care about him. The old man was petrified, not moving an inch. Could the blood lobsters cooked by Bufang be that delicious? He couldn't accept it. Something was wrong. The old man pulled himself together, his eyes disbelieving. The recipe he had studied for thousands of years couldn't compare to a little chef. He was the first valley master of the Valley of Gluttony, a legendary chef. How could he lose like that? That man and dog must have done it on purpose. Unforgivable. I can't accept it. I can't accept it. The old man roared. The strand of white hair on his head fluttered in the wind. Shut up. Just as the old man was screaming crazily, Hades' turned his head, glaring at the old man. The old man's voice stopped. This young man's cultivation base was unfathomable. Although he was muddle-headed due to his failure, he knew that if this young man wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. No matter what, in this world, he couldn't use his cultivation base. He could only rely on his physical strength to resist. Thus, encountering Hades' who could use his cultivation base, he could only be crushed. The spicy blood lobster's cooking process was complicated, but it tasted really good. It wasn't beyond Bufang's expectation that this dish could beat the old man's steamed blood lobster. The old man's understanding of the blood lobster was a little problematic. Although it was delicious, it didn't have that alluring feeling. A bowl of spicy blood lobster had completely crushed the old man. And this time, he ate to his heart's content. The eyes of the chef sitting cross-legged in the kitchen moved. He seemed to know the final answer. No matter if it was Lord Go or Hades' era, they were attracted by Bufang's spicy blood lobster. Thus, there was no suspense. This time, the winner was Bufang. Thus, Bufang was the one who got the qualification to enter the Heaven Chief's realm. The chef's eyes were deep. He gazed at Bufang, giving Bufang goosebumps. The old man wasn't resigned. He clutched his head, and his eyes were filled with unwillingness. However, no matter how unwilling he was, the final winner had appeared. It was Bufang. My transcendence. I've waited for thousands of years, but I lost because of a bowl of blood lobster. I can't accept this. The old man was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. However, no one cared about him. No matter how unwilling he was, it didn't stir the chef's mood. All of a sudden, the old man's body stiffened. Then, he felt a mysterious wave of energy emit from the Heaven Chief's realm chef. There was a roar. The scene in front of the old man's eyes disappeared. A moment later, he was bewildered. He found himself expelled from the kitchen. The surrounding gazes landed on him, making him feel extremely unnatural. He knew the owners of those eyes. They were the strongest Demon King, Amethyst Elder, and the others. Apparently, they didn't expect that the one who was expelled the second time would be the first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. That year, the Valley of Gluttony's first Valley Master had shaken the world. His cooking skills had shaken the entire Hidden Dragon region. He had created the Valley of Gluttony and subdued many holy lands. But now, several thousand years had passed. The Valley of Gluttony had declined. The famous first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony had been defeated by a little chef in the cooking test. It really made people feel a little helpless. The old man pulled himself together. However, his mind was shivering, and he was about to burst out. He dashed toward the space underneath. However, this time, he couldn't get in. There seemed to be a layer of invisible power isolating them from the space beneath the palace. In the underground space, Hades' era and the Lord Go were facing each other. One man and one dog were glaring at each other. Bufang clasped his hands, his face emotionless as he looked at the chef from the Heaven Chief realm. Originally, he wasn't curious about the items in the palace. However, as he had won, his curiosity rose again. This chance seems a little too easy. Bufang sighed inwardly. A fragrant spicy blood lobster had easily won the final victory. Was that old man too weak? Bufang mumbled to himself. Congratulations on getting the qualification to enter the Heaven Chief realm. However, you just got the qualification. If you want to enter the Heaven Chief realm, you need to wait for the Heaven Chief realm's gate to open. The chef said. The Heaven Chief realm? Bufang was a little sensitive to this name. If it dared to call itself the Heaven Chief realm, it must be an extraordinary place. Bufang took a deep breath, looking at the chef indifferently. The Heaven Chief realm is a chef's paradise. It's the place where the top chefs in the world want to transcend. Only when they get there, they can see more top chefs and feel the immeasurable power of cooking. The chef was still talking at a steady pace. Bufang listened quietly. He was really interested in the Heaven Chief realm. He always felt that he would go there one day. Buzz, after the chef finished talking, his deep eyes gazed at Bufang. Now, I'm going to give you the qualification token. It's your chance. I hope you can grasp it. Young man, this world is really big. Broaden your vision. A real chef's goal is the sea of stars. The chef's voice became fainter, and his body became darker and darker. Slowly, he became transparent. Just like what the Lord Go had said, this chef was just a clone. In Bufang's eyes, the chef's body became transparent. Eventually, he turned into a wisp of milky white spirit energy, swaying. That energy was so mysterious that it attracted Bufang's eyes. It was so dazzling, blooming with extreme radiance. That's a wisp of immortal energy. It was unknown when the Lord Go and Hades era had their eyes fixed on that wisp of milky immortal energy. If you want to transcend, you must have immortal energy. Immortal energy is the foundation of transcendence. The Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice arose. Bufang, kid, although your cooking skills aren't bad, compared to those chefs in the Heaven Chief realm, there's a big gap, the Lord Go said. The Lord Go said. Bufang's eyes focused. Was there a gap between him and the chefs in the Heaven Chief realm? What gap? Bufang's face was expressionless. With the system, he didn't think that there was a big gap between him and the chefs in the Heaven Chief realm. The gap between the sky and the earth, the gap between a human and an immortal. You can't even imagine it. The Lord Go's voice became cold, and in that instant, Bufang felt a great pressure. Buzz, that wisp of immortal energy swayed. Then, it turned into a token and flew toward Bufang with a swishing sound. At this moment, Bufang was still immersed in the solemnity of the Lord Go. Instinctively, he raised his bandaged hand and held the token. The token, which was shrouded in immortal energy, made Bufang's entire body shake. He could feel the warmth coming from the token. A suction force burst out from his palm, sucking the wisp of immortal energy in the token into his body. The Lord Go's eyes stared at Bufang. When he saw the token's luster dim in an instant, his dog eyes narrowed, revealing an expression as if he had expected this to happen. At this moment, Bufang didn't pay any attention to the Lord Go. At this moment, the spirit sea in his head seemed to be about to explode. The system, which had been silent for a long time, spoke in a serious voice. Chapter 885. Detected that the host has obtained immortal energy. System's immortal energy fusion begins. The system's serious voice arose in Bufang's head, which made Bufang narrow his eyes. The system could detect immortal energy? No doubt, the immortal energy in the jade token was absorbed by the system. Moreover, the system and the immortal energy were fusing. What did that mean? Could the immortal energy increase the system's level or his cultivation base? Bufang sank into his thoughts, standing at his spot. The Lord Go's words had alerted him. He had always thought that the Lord Go was very mysterious. He thought that after he had met the 3 prisons of the netherworld, he had understood some of the Lord Go's secret. But now, it seemed that he hadn't. The Lord Go was still so unfathomable, as though he had a deep understanding of the Heaven Chief realm. Bufang took a deep breath. According to the Lord Go, there was a gap between him and the chefs of the Heaven Chief realm, and he didn't have any idea about this gap. It was because he had never met the chefs of the Heaven Chief realm. Even the chef in the Bronze Palace was just a wisp of immortal energy. Actually, Bufang wasn't convinced. No matter what, with his competence, the dishes he could cook weren't ordinary. Even in the Valley of Gluttony, he could crush everything. However, the Lord Go still felt that his cooking skills were not as good as the chefs of the Heaven Chief realm. This had stirred up the unwillingness in Bufang's heart. The immortal energy fusion is complete. The turnover task is completed ahead of time. Now, the reward will be distributed. The system's serious voice arose in Bufang's head one more time. It made Bufang startled. The immortal energy fusion was complete? The task was completed ahead of time? Bufang was a little bewildered. Then, his eyes shrank. What did it mean? This meant that the so-called immortal qi actually had the effect of promoting one's cultivation. For a long time, Bufang thought that the improvement of his cultivation was only related to the turnover of his restaurant. He didn't expect that the immortal qi in the Heaven Chief realm could also improve his cultivation. Bufang didn't have any expression on his face, but he was terrified in his heart. His entire being was immersed in a burst of joy. After a long time, he closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and looked at the system panel. Host, Bufang. True energy cultivation. Peak divine soul realm. Cooking talent. 6 stars skills. Level 2 meteor cutting technique, 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper carving technique, 100 out of 100. Level 1 cutting technique. Overlord 13 blades, 11 out of 13. Gourmet array 2 out of 6. Tools. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, God of Cooking Set. Black Turtle Constellation Wok, God of Cooking Set. Vermilion Chef Robe, God of Cooking Set. God of Cooking Overall Rating. Senior Chef, fused with Immortal Chi. Cooking level and cooking ability improved. Understanding of ingredients and cooking methods improved by another level. Starting to enter a higher realm of cooking skills. System level. Level 3 can fuse with Immortal Chi. True energy conversion rate increased to 200%. System reward. Obtain the qualification to enter the system farmland. 1 fragment of the God of Cooking set, 3/5. Bufang carefully observed the system panel. He realized that many things on the panel had changed. First of all, his cultivation base had directly increased from the Divine Soul Realm to the peak of the Divine Soul Realm. Moreover, he had the chance to trigger the Divine Spirit Realms test. Regarding this test, Bufang was very cautious. He didn't choose to accept it. He had to prepare properly before he could take the Divine Spirit Realms test. After all, the Divine Soul Realms test wasn't easy. The Divine Spirit Realms test would be even more difficult. What concerned Bufang was his God of Cooking overall rating. It had actually reached the senior chef level. Could it be that the senior chef's level was much lower than the chefs in the Heaven Chief realm? Bufang narrowed his eyes. When it came to cooking, Bufang didn't like it when people questioned him. The Lord Go's questioning of him made him a little unhappy. However, it aroused his competitive spirit. System, what's with this immortal energy? And how much do you know about the Heaven Chief realm? Asked Bufang. Before, he was just an intermediate chef, so he wasn't qualified to know this information. However, now that he was a senior chef, Bufang tried to ask. His eyes focused, and his heart was filled with anticipation. After a long while, the system finally answered him seriously. Immortal energy is a kind of high-level energy. When chefs use it, it can improve the taste of their dishes and the intensity of their energy. Can make the ingredients last for 10,000 years. Said the system. Bufang's entire body shook. It turned out that the Yang Chun noodles could last for 10,000 years because of the immortal energy, and the transcendence that the strongest demon king and the first valley master of the Valley of Gluttony had mentioned was because of the immortal energy. A wisp of immortal energy was that effective? How could he get the immortal energy? If the host wants to get the immortal energy, he can enter the Heaven Chief realm. The Heaven Chief realm is a high-level planet in the starry sky. It has immortal energy, said the system seriously. How do I get to the Heaven Chief realm? Asked Bufang. You can wait for the gate to the Heaven Chief realm to open. The system has detected that the gate to the Heaven Chief realm will open in 3 years. Said the system. 3 years. It should be enough. Bufang nodded, narrowing his eyes. System's minor requirement. If the host wants to enter the Heaven Chief realm, his cooking talent must reach 7 stars. Bufang was bewildered. His cooking talent must reach 7 stars, Bufang was dumbstruck. From the system panel, he knew that his cooking talent was only 6 stars. He needed to reach 7 stars to get to the Heaven Chief realm. Did it mean that in the next 3 years, he needed to increase his cooking talent to 7 stars? Exhaling deeply, Bufang felt his body full of energy. So what if it was the Heaven Chief realm? He wanted to become the god of cooking who stood at the top of the food chain in this fantasy world. The Heaven Chief realm could crush him. Bufang felt his heroic spirit soaring high. Lord Go looked at Bufang, who was in a daze. Then, he realized that Bufang's energy had started to rise. The bronze palace rumbled. Then, the thick spirit energy in the air started to gather on Bufang's body. A massive vortex spun and rumbled, making the air squeak as if it couldn't bear the pressure. Bufang stood at his spot. He could feel the spirit energy above his head unceasingly pouring into his body. His cultivation base was increasing unceasingly. In his head, a sparkling, jade-like soul ladder condensed. 9 steps of the soul ladder had formed a divine altar. Hades' Era rolled his eyes, looking at Bufang. Bufang, young man, is he about to break through? This bronze palace has gathered the spirit energy of the entire southern region. It's enough for him to break through. Hades said. Lord Go yawned, lying on the ground. This kid's journey has just begun. When he gets to the Heaven Chief realm, he will have to face many powerful chefs. When Nether King Erha heard that, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Lord Dog. You mangy dog, you act as if you've been to the Heaven Chief realm. Lord Go lay on the ground, using his paws to play with his fur. You're right. Lord Go, I've been to that place. Hades' Era was bewildered. Then, he got over it. No matter what, this mangy dog's identity wasn't ordinary. It was normal that he had been to the Heaven Chief realm. Hades' Era was a little envious. The Heaven Chief realm was the gathering place of the top chefs in every plane. There must be a lot of delicious food there. If he could go there once, it would be great. Perhaps, he would have a lot of spicy strips to eat. After a while, the spirit energy of heaven and earth calmed down. Bufang slowly opened his eyes, and it seemed as though everything was vanishing in his eyes. After all, he hadn't ignited the divine flame. No matter what, he hadn't taken the divine spirit realm's assessment. Buzz, a wave of mysterious energy rippled. The energy that had been shrouding the entrance to the underground had disappeared. The group of people sitting at the entrance immediately opened their eyes and looked at the entrance. There, 2 figures slowly walked out from within. We're out. We're finally out. Stinky kid, hand over my good fortune. The old man bellowed, crazily dashing toward Bufang. Ever since he was chased out of the kitchen, he had been restless. His transcendence, his good fortune, it was as though everything had nothing to do with him the moment he was chased out. He couldn't stand this kind of grievance. Bufang frowned, looking at the old man indifferently. Hades' Era shrugged his shoulders. A moment later, he raised his hand, flicking his finger. It was impossible to dodge, hitting the old man's forehead. Then, a clear sound rang out. The old man's body was sent flying backward. With a loud thud, he landed far away, sliding a long distance. When Amethyst Elder saw Hades' Era, his heart was filled with anger. This guy. He came too. He was curious why his daughter, Saint Daughter Ziyun, was here. Indeed, it was related to this kid. Thinking about how his daughter had been abducted by a netherworld creature, his heart turned cold. Boom! Boom! 2 massive fists pounded the ground. Instantly, the strongest demon king bolted up from the ground, his eyes gazing at Bufang. You're the human who took the good fortune? You've transcended? The strongest demon king said, his voice booming like thunder. No, there's no transcendence here. Bufang said seriously. He was telling the truth. The strongest demon king and the Valley of Gluttony's master had been misled by the legends. This bronze palace had immortal energy, but it was just a wisp of immortal energy. To achieve transcendence, just a wisp of immortal energy wasn't enough. Thus, it was impossible to transcend in this bronze palace. In other words, the Valley of Gluttony's master and the Valley of Gluttony's master had been deceived. No transcendence? I don't believe it. The strongest demon king's tall figure coldly looked at Bufang. He didn't put a human in his eyes. However, his eyes turned, falling on Lord Go and Hades' Era, who were standing by Bufang. Of course, the strongest demon king knew these two. His pupils constricted as a look of horror appeared on his face. How could a human and a dog appear here? Bufang clasped his hands, looking at the strongest demon king, his eyes indifferent. The strongest demon king was extremely unwilling. He gave Bufang a deep look. Then, a low, muffled voice arose. I've waited for 10,000 years for a chance. A human like you shouldn't think that you can take it away so easily. I'll be back. The strongest demon king snorted. Then, he turned around, walking out of the bronze palace. With a loud bang, the strongest demon king's figure disappeared. Bufang exhaled, his face emotionless. He swept his gaze across the bronze palace and the other people in the palace before walking out. Serpentmen's city. All the serpentmen lifted their heads, their faces skeptical. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. That was because they discovered that their serpent people city was shrouded in swirling starlight that filled the sky. The starlight was like flowing water, dreamy and illusory. Many serpentmen looked at the starlight, completely immersed in it. At the source of the starlight, a silhouette slowly floated up. Her long black hair spread out in all directions. At his glabella, a dot of light emerged. A moment later, that dot of light expanded, directly shooting up into the sky, turning into a beam of light that pierced through heaven and earth. Rumble! In the illusory spirit swamp, an indomitable giant body suddenly dashed out. Terrifying nether energy rolled and scattered, covering the sky and the sun. This giant figure stood proudly in the sky. Opening his arms, he breathed in the fresh air. Instantly, his eyes revealed a look of nostalgia. I, the strongest demon king, have returned. Chapter 886. A surging laughter shook the entire southern region. Everybody lifted their heads in fright, looking at the sky. The sky darkened at a speed naked eyes could observe. Darkness seemed to descend in just a blink of an eye, making the entire world seem like it was the end of the world. Wild laughter reverberated in the sky. Above the illusory spirit swamp, a huge figure stood proudly in the sky. His bulging muscles trembled slightly, bursting forth with a terrifying force. His eyes were like bronze bells, as if he wanted to see through everything in this world. The strongest demon king had been sealed underground in the southern region for 10,000 years. Today, it was time to break his shackles and return to this world. Unfortunately, he hadn't grasped the transcendence that he had chased after that year. If he could grasp the transcendence, it would be good for him. Feeling the fresh air in this world again, the strongest demon king couldn't help but close his eyes. All of a sudden, the strongest demon king opened his eyes. His eyes focused as he looked into the distance. There was a beam of light shooting up into the sky. That beam of light was so dazzling, with starlight moving around it. Heavenly Star Catcher Disk? The Hidden Dragon Continent's Heavenly Star Catcher Disk. The Demon King narrowed his eyes. Then, he took a step forward, crossing the sky. In just one step, he appeared above the Serpentmen city. Rumble! All the Serpentmen lifted their heads in fright, their faces filled with fear. That terrifying pressure made them feel as if they were experiencing the end of the world. An Yan's figure floated up. Her beautiful body was completely enveloped by the radiance of the starry sky. The entire Serpentmen city was covered in that radiance. The Serpentmen's eyes were blurry. They reached out their hands, touching the void. Their palms passed through those stars. An Yan's glabella sparkled. Her spirit sea was surging furiously. The Heavenly Star Catcher Disk was fusing with her spirit fast. Once they fused, there would be two possibilities. One was that the Heavenly Star Catcher Disk would swallow an Yan's consciousness. The other was that the Heavenly Star Catcher Disk would assimilate her. She would lose all emotions and desires. No matter what, the great path of heaven was heartless. The Heavenly Star Catcher Disk was a formation that connected to the great path of heaven. Of course, it was heartless. The strongest demon king floated above the grand Serpentmen city. His body continued to expand, and in the end, he seemed to have turned into a giant. His body descended, covering the entire sky above the Grand Serpentmen city. All the Serpentmen were terrified. What kind of monster is this? Why was it as big as the heavens and earth? To fuse with the heavenly star-catcher disk here, this human is really daring. In that case, I will fulfill your wish, the strongest demon king said. His voice resounded in the sky and reverberated in everyone's ears. Then, the strongest demon king stretched out a hand and raised one of his fingers. The finger slowly pressed down on the Grand Serpentmen city. Rumble! The faces of all the Nagas were filled with horror as they watched the finger grow larger and larger in their eyes. His mind instantly turned blank. The strongest demon king's finger pointed downwards, and that huge finger continuously became smaller and smaller. In the end, it turned into an ordinary finger and hung down. An Yan's body floated in the air. That finger immediately pressed down, touching her glabella. Suddenly, an Yan's body trembled, and the starlight that surrounded her body shattered. It was like glass shattering. An Yan furrowed her brows, groaning. Blood oozed from her mouth and nose. A moment later, an Yan fell on the bed, feeling weak and powerless. That finger slowly rose, disappearing in the end. Outside the room, the serpent woman maid was shivering on the ground. She didn't dare to move, all the serpent men didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Only when the laughter in the sky faded away did they have the courage to move. Swoosh! 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 Many figures dashed out of the mine. The experts who had been surrounding the entrance were instantly alerted. The oceanic species experts and the demon-scorpion races experts were solemnly watching the experts dashing out of the mine. When the demon-scorpion races experts saw the demon-scorpion races commander, who was shivering in the back, their faces changed. The one walking in the front was the human who had dashed through them. That human wasn't dead yet. Some demon-scorpion races experts screamed. However, as soon as they showed their hostility, the demon-scorpion races commander slapped them away. Why are you so fierce? Didn't you see that I'm the last one standing? Do you think we can provoke that human? He even dared to snatch the strongest demon king's opportunity. How could we have the courage to provoke him? It wasn't just Bufang. Whether it was the old man who had killed 7 heavenly ethereal realm experts or the purple-haired amethyst elder, they weren't people they could provoke. As for the stinky shrimp from the oceanic species, didn't they see their relative lying on that awesome human's shoulder? He didn't dare to provoke that human. Bufang walked out of the mine. Looking at the many creatures around, he instantly narrowed his eyes. Aobai, who was following Bufang, paled. His mental consciousness was released, telling the oceanic species people not to cause trouble. They couldn't bully that human. The shrimp ancestor was still with him. Bufang walked out of the mine, taking a deep breath. Finally, he got out. He wondered how an Yen was doing. That woman was a ticking time bomb. No matter what, she had the heavenly star-catcher disk in her head, which was connected to the hidden dragon continent's great path. Once the great path was broken, the hidden dragon continent would lose its greatest defense. Naturally, it wouldn't be able to resist the invaders. Bufang looked at the crowd, but he didn't say anything. He strode toward the direction of the Grand Serpentmen city. The strongest demon king was the first to get out. He felt that something bad was about to happen, so he had to hurry back. His figure was like a phantom, flying across the illusory spirit swamp. Lord Go and Hades' era followed behind him easily. The others also followed. Shortly, they dashed toward the Serpentmen city at a speed naked eyes could observe. Shortly, Bufang reached the Serpentmen city. However, as soon as he arrived, the insecure feeling in his heart became even thicker. His rationality told him that he had to leave now. However, his grandfather was lying on that human's shoulder. Thus, he felt that he had to talk to that human. Thus, he brought the Oceanic Species Army to the Serpentmen City. However, so many Oceanic Species experts had scared the Serpentmen City's experts out of their wits. It was because the Oceanic Species experts had scared the Serpentmen City. Now that the Oceanic Species Army had arrived, they had no choice but to be fearful. However, the Serpentmen City had just experienced the strongest Demon King's pressure. The Serpentmen experts were shivering as they lay on the ground. As soon as Bufang entered the Serpentmen City, he was a little skeptical. His mental force spread out, and he sensed the star aura in the air. His face slightly changed. Bufang returned to the room he had arranged for him. The Serpentman maid was shivering as she lay on the ground, her body shivering. Bufang didn't mind her. He directly pushed the door open, entering the room. Yu and the others followed him. An Yen was lying on the bed. Her face was ashen, and the corners of her mouth were red. The air was filled with the scent of blood. Tisk, tsk, tsk. What a pitiful little girl. Her spirit's sea was broken. Hades Era walked to Bufang, looking at the girl's pale face. He couldn't help but comment. He didn't need to think to know that the one who had broken this girl's spirit's sea was the strongest Demon King, who had left earlier. Only the strongest Demon King's strength could achieve such a feat. At the same time, the heavenly star-catcher disk was broken in the following days. The hidden dragon continent was going to be miserable. Hades Era could already imagine the current situation of the hidden dragon heaven pass. Without the protection of the Great Path, the few saint sovereigns of the Holy Lands couldn't protect the place. Lord Go lay on the ground, yawning. He found a comfortable place to lie down, planning to sleep. The heavenly star-catcher disk is broken? Bufang furrowed his brows. Anyway, there should be a way to save him. However, it will be more difficult to save this kind of person who is almost dead, Nether King Erha said. It's not a problem that a dish can save her. A dish couldn't save her? That dish wasn't good enough, of course. Bufang furrowed his brows. Looking at Yan's dispirited aura, he gently exhaled. This woman couldn't die. If she died, what would happen to his Acheron helplessness wine? Bufang rubbed his head. Looking at Yan's face, he felt a little pain in his balls. Hades looked at Bufang, his nostrils dilating. Bufang, young man, I'll give you 3 spicy blood lobsters. I will help you stabilize this woman's spirit sea. What do you think? Nether King Erha crossed his arms over his chest, smiling. Stabilize the spirit sea? 10 spicy blood lobsters. Help me fix her spirit sea, said Bufang. Hades Era's eyes brightened. However, he forced a smile and rubbed his nose. No, I can only help you stabilize her spirit sea. I'm good at destroying. Saving people. It's not bad if I can stabilize it. 10 spicy blood lobsters. Hades Era's heart was bleeding. Hearing that Hades couldn't fix Yan's spirit sea, Bufang was a little begrudging. Then, you should stabilize it first. I'll think of a way to fix it, Bufang said. Hades Era glanced at Bufang. Good, young people these days. Tsk, 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 the price of love is too big. 3 spicy blood lobsters. Bufang looked at Hades Era, his face emotionless. I just need her to wake up and help me make wine. A really good wine. Nether King Erha shrugged meaningfully, revealing a smile that we all understood. Then, he walked in front of Yen. His finger drew in the air, then tapped Yen's glabella 3 times. Every time he tapped, black nether energy entered Yen's brain. After 3 times, Yen's complexion became better. Her unceasingly dispersing mental force was also stabilized. Bufang furrowed his brows. It was time to think of a way to save Yen. While Bufang was having a headache, the system's voice echoed in his head. The system's mission reward has been released. Host, please check. Chapter 887. The System's Task Reward? The system's notification made Bufang a little dazed. Then, he remembered that after absorbing the immortal energy, He had leveled up, which meant that he had completed his task. He should be rewarded. He remembered that the reward was the opening of the system farmland and a fragment of the God of Cooking set. If he collected all the fragments of the God of Cooking set, he would have another God of Cooking set. Bufang was looking forward to the last piece of the God of Cooking set. Currently, the 3 pieces of the God of Cooking set, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, the black turtle constellation walk, and the vermilion robe, hadn't been fully developed. He hadn't even reached the pinnacle of communicating with the tool spirit. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife had just awakened its tool spirit. However, he couldn't deny that even if the God of Cooking set hadn't been awakened yet, it would still be a great help to him. Bufang would never complain about having too many things that could help him. Hades' era used 3 fingers to help Enai Yen stabilize her collapsing spirit sea. If he wanted to stabilize her spirit sea, he would need Bufang's dishes to help her recover. This matter couldn't be rushed. Seizing this time, Bufang began to observe the system farmland in his head. Bufang's mind settled down. Shortly after, he sensed the new reward, the system farmland. System, what's the so-called farmland? Bufang asked the system with a frown. To this question, the system quickly gave him an answer. The system farmland is an independent world that the system rewards the host with. You can grow fruits, vegetables, and heaven and earth spirit herbs. The system's serious voice echoed in Bufang's head. You can grow fruits and vegetables? Bufang's brows arched. Did the system want to uphold the principle that the dishes you grow are the most delicious? The system farmland is a tool to help the host cook top-notch delicacies. The host can research and develop the specific operation, the system said. After it finished speaking, it became silent, and there was no longer any sound. Bufang was a little speechless. He felt that the system was getting lazier and lazier. What's wrong with explaining? Bufang was also helpless. His mind settled down, and soon, he found the system farmland. Bufang's mind trembled. In the next moment, the scene in front of him changed dramatically. The sky was azure and the breeze was gentle. The fresh air lingered in the air, and the endless green grassland stretched as far as the eye could see. Bufang stood in the middle of the dark green grassland and looked at the endless grassland in a daze. What was going on? Where's the promised garden? King gave me a vast grassland? Since when did the system become so polite? At this time, Bufang finally understood what the system meant by self-research and development. Indeed, he had to develop it himself. He didn't have anything. Everything had to be created with his own hand. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. He clasped his hands behind his back and slowly walked on the grassland. The density of the spirit energy in the farmland was very high. As Bufang walked in it, his whole body felt as if he was bathing in milk, silky smooth and supple. Squatting down, Bufang grabbed a handful of green grass on the ground. That grass was clear green, straight and upright, as if there was energy flowing on it. Bufang pinched the grass with 2 fingers. Instantly, it was cut into 2 pieces, and the grass juice flowed out, bringing with it a grassy fragrance. This grass was growing well. It seemed that the nutrients in this land weren't bad. Bufang continued to walk. This farmland didn't seem very big. After walking for a while, Bufang reached the end. At the end was a gray area, as if the grassland was shrouded by a hazy gray mist. Eventually, Bufang summarized the main features of the farmland that the system had given him. The sky was clear, and there was a vast grassland on the ground. There was also a winding, slow-flowing river. Bufang took a sip of the water from that river. It was cold and sweet. It wasn't any worse than the heavenly mountain spirit spring water stored in Bufang's system-dimensional bag. This made Bufang quite happy. The key was that there was water. This farmland could be used to plant some spirit herbs and raise some rare spirit beasts. Bufang suddenly thought of 80, who was staying in the Cloud Mist restaurant. It was really a waste to let this 8 treasures chicken roam around the restaurant every day. Who knew when this chicken would be captured by someone, plucked, and roasted for food? It would be better to throw this little fellow into the farmland. He could let this 8 treasures chicken lay an egg, hatch a little 8 treasures chicken, lay another egg, and hatch another little 8 treasures chicken. Repeating this process, he would have many 8 treasures chickens. At that time, Bufang could consider eating fried young chicken. Or he could try the taste of 8 treasures chicken. As a top-grade ingredient, the 8 treasures chicken was undoubtedly delicious. As the plump 80 appeared in his mind, the corners of Bufang's mouth couldn't help but twitch, and he smacked his lips. In the Cloud Mist restaurant, 80, who had eaten its fill, slowly walked around the restaurant. All of a sudden, 80 felt a cold feeling envelop it, and it felt as though all the feathers on its body were about to stand on end. Damn it, who's trying to take advantage of your 8th brother? The first thing to do in a farmland was to plow the land. Bufang rubbed his chin. After thinking for a long time, he left the farmland, and his mind returned to reality. After bargaining with the system for a long time, his mind returned to the heaven and earth farmland. Rumble! Bufang tossed pile after pile of materials onto the ground. Some of these materials were precious wood, while others were the seeds of various spirit beasts. Of course, there was also a dumbstruck 3-eyed wild lion. It was the pitiful 3-eyed wild lion that Hades' era had sold to Bufang for a few spicy strip. Now that it had appeared in this farmland, it was somewhat bewildered. It had always thought that its fate was to become an ingredient and be cooked by that damn chef. However, now that it had appeared in this farmland, it suddenly felt somewhat liberated. The 3-eyed wild lion's heart was instantly filled with joy. It was about to be liberated. Roar! The 3-eyed wild lion roared, and its fur fluttered in the comfortable breeze. It was contented, and its mood was good. Its paws patted the ground, and it leaped high. Finally, it was free from that stinky chef's restraint. It was so happy. Taking small, graceful steps, it strolled in this boundless, comfortable grassland. The 3-eyed wild lion was very happy. Little 3, where are you going? Come and plow the land. Plow the land, and you'll have food to eat. You won't be killed. All of a sudden, a faint voice arose in this heaven and earth. The 3-eyed wild lion, who was taking small, graceful steps, shivered, and its fur shivered. The 3-eyed wild lion jerked its head around, its 3 eyes gazing at the figure that was slowly emerging. It was that stinky chef. Who did that stinky chef call? It was the noble and powerful 3-eyed wild lion, not little 3. Who did it call little 3? Bufang clasped his hands, his vermilion robe fluttering in the breeze of the farmland. He looked at the jumping 3-eyed wild lion in front of him, gently exhaling. He didn't bring the 3-eyed wild lion to the heaven and earth farmland to watch the other's graceful steps. He needed the other's majestic body to help him plow the land. Roar! Only that stinky chef? The 3-eyed wild lion narrowed its eyes. Instantly, its body emitted a powerful aura. Without that master, this lion could swallow that stinky chef in one bite. Its 2 paws patted the ground, causing the grassland to explode. The 3-eyed wild lion roared, dashing toward Bufang. Bufang's hair fluttered and his vermilion robe swayed. Indifferently looking at the 3-eyed wild lion dashing toward him, Bufang's mouth rose. Seems like I need to make you listen to me. Bufang raised his right hand, and the black and white bandage on his arm shot out radiance. The souls of the black and white Tautais emerged. The 2 Tautais appeared behind Bufang. The 3-eyed wild lion roared, its voice shaking the entire sky. Boom! One punch. Facing the 3-eyed wild lion that was dashing toward him, Bufang chose to use a simple punch. The 3-eyed wild lion's giant body was blown away by Bufang's punch. It made an arc in the air, falling far away. After struggling for a while, it got up. The 3-eyed wild lion was enraged to the extreme. It bared its fangs, then pounced on Bufang. If one punch didn't work, then 2 punches. Facing the three-eyed wild lion, Bufang decided to hit it until it was scared. At this moment, Bufang's cultivation base had reached the peak of the divine soul realm. Whether it was his cultivation base or his body, he could easily crush the three-eyed wild lion. Not to mention his extremely powerful Spirit Sea. After breaking through, Bufang's Spirit Sea had widened a lot. Although it wasn't as big as when he had awakened the Gold Dragon Tool Spirit, Bufang's mental force had reached the so-called Divine Soul Realm. Moreover, it wasn't an ordinary Divine Soul Realm expert. Bufang's mental force had always been stronger than his true energy cultivation base. As for how much stronger it was, Bufang didn't know. The three-eyed wild lion was scared. It lay on the ground with a swollen face, whimpering like a frightened kitten. Swoosh, sounds of impact arose. Then, a bunch of farming tools appeared in front of the three-eyed wild lion. The three-eyed wild lion was bewildered. Little 3, be good. Dig the soil in this area. Bufang rubbed the three-eyed wild lion's head, his face emotionless. The three-eyed wild lion was enraged. He was the noble three-eyed wild lion of the ruined prison. He wasn't a cow that plowed the fields. The three-eyed wild lion would rather be killed than humiliated. Boom! The furious roar of the Taotia's soul resounded from his arm. The three-eyed wild lion became listless, crouching on the ground. His face emotionless, Bufang helped the three-eyed wild lion put the plowing tools. He patted the three-eyed wild lion's head, making it stand up obediently. Step by step, it started to plow the field. A warrior would rather be killed than humiliated? The three-eyed wild lion didn't doubt that after it was killed, it would become a delicious dish. That would be even more humiliating. Compared to being made into a delicious dish, plowing the field was nothing. Looking at the three-eyed wild lion plowing the field, Bufang exhaled in relief. Then, Bufang picked up the hoe and followed the lion. As the three-eyed wild lion plowed the field, Bufang used the hoe to loosen the soil. This fertile land was filled with spirit energy and energy. It was a good place to plant crops. It was worthy of the farmland the system had provided. Bufang had started to think about what ingredients he should plant in this land. He wanted to turn this farmland into the best garden for cooking ingredients. This garden would become his firm support on his path to becoming the god of cooking. Chapter 888. The Heaven and Earth farmland's development couldn't be rushed, so Bufang let the three-eyed wild lion do as it pleased. He left the farmland and returned to the real world. At this moment, Anai Yen was sleeping soundly. Her life wasn't in danger, but the heavenly star-catcher disc was broken by the strongest demon king. Bufang needed Anai Yen to awaken the heavenly star-catcher disc to help him brew wine. If the heavenly star-catcher disc was broken, the acheron grass and the flower of helplessness that Bufang had collected in Earth Prison would be useless. Thus, Bufang thought that he had to find a way to save Anai Yen. In the great hall of the Serpent Men's city, at this moment, the Serpent Men didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They all shivered as they looked at the figures sitting in the great hall. One of them was a man wearing a long purple robe. His purple hair cascaded, and his aura was like a dragon swallowing the sun and the moon. His aura made the Serpent Men experts shiver. There was also a golden-haired oceanic species expert. He was just sitting, but the pressure from his body suffocated the Serpent Men experts. There was also an old man who was even more terrifying. With just a glance, the Serpent Men experts were petrified. That old man was definitely a supreme existence. He was an expert they couldn't even imagine. Bufang and Hades' era had returned. They came to the great hall of the Serpent Men's city. Finding a seat, Hades' era sat down. Then, he looked at the others in the great hall. Amethyst Elder's sharp eyes locked on Hades' era. That fellow dared to flirt with his daughter. Saint Daughter Zi Yun didn't care about Amethyst Elder's gaze. When she saw Hades' era, she happily ran toward him. No matter how Amethyst Elder scolded her, it was useless. Amethyst Elder was so angry that his lungs hurt. When the old man saw Bufang, his eyes brightened. This little chef had a chance to transcend. Unfortunately, the young man and the dog were protecting him. Otherwise, the old man wouldn't have been able to control himself. After returning to the continent, the old man's cultivation base had also recovered. Back then, his cultivation was extremely terrifying and valiant, not to mention now. Although he hadn't broken through the shackles, he was still one of the top people in the Hidden Dragon continent. He felt that he could bargain with Bufang now. Aobai came for Xiaopi, who was sitting on Bufang's shoulder. That was a freaking shrimp ancestor. That human was raising it as a pet. Raising the shrimp ancestor of the sea race as a pet, this was a disgrace. Now, when Aobai saw Bufang again, his heart shuddered, his face bewildered. Because he realized that he could no longer see through this human's cultivation. Why couldn't he see through it? Yesterday, this human was just at the divine soul realm with a one-step soul ladder. How could he not see through him today? This increase in cultivation was equivalent to ascending the stairway to heaven, right? Aobai's lips trembled. Thinking about how this human punched the ruined prison's great demon Scorpion in the Bronze Palace and how he kicked the 7 heavenly ethereal realm experts, it was as if he was using a cheat. What King Divine Soul Realm with a one-step soul ladder? This human was definitely pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. He heard that the chance in the Bronze Palace was snatched by this human. This human was really abnormal. There were so many experts there, but he, a human, had snatched the chance. What should he say? Thus, Aobai couldn't directly take away the shrimp ancestor lying on Bufang's shoulder. He had to come and negotiate. The experts of the Grand Serpentine City gawked and dropped their jaws as they watched the scene. Looking at the expressionless human chatting with the big shots and bargaining with them, their thoughts were a little confused. That human, wasn't he the Serpentine Empress guest? The Empress guest was so awesome. Yu Fu also felt that she couldn't understand Ownerbu anymore. Was he really the same Ownerbu who was just a 7th-grade battle saint? The negotiation lasted for around 2 hours. Eventually, everybody left. Aobai was helpless. He couldn't persuade Bufang, and he wasn't qualified to persuade Bufang. However, after the final negotiation, he sincerely invited Bufang to bring the shrimp ancestor back to the Endless Sea. He even gave Bufang a spirit talisman carved from a shell. It was used to communicate and communicate. Of course, Bufang wouldn't refuse. In his eyes, the Endless Sea was an endless treasure trove. It was a vast sea, and its ingredients were absolutely as attractive as the sea. Regarding the sea, Bufang also had his own curiosity. The delicacies of the sea also had a unique charm. Since Bufang had to go back to the Endless Sea, he didn't refuse Aobai. After Aobai got Bufang's promise, he left with a face full of smiles. He brought his oceanic species troops, leaving the Grand Serpentine City and returning to the Endless Sea. Although the oceanic species troops didn't get any substantial benefits from this trip, it was enough. However, the news of the shrimp ancestor was enough. If they could bring the shrimp ancestor back, their gold shrimp ancestor would rise again and regain the right to speak in the Endless Sea. The old man wanted Bufang's opportunity. After talking with Bufang for a long time, Bufang naturally wouldn't give him the immortal aura. Bufang also couldn't give it to him. After all, the immortal aura had already been absorbed by the system. Thus, Bufang mercilessly rejected the old man. However, he told the old man that there would be an opportunity in 3 years. At that time, the gate of the Heaven Chief realm would open. The old man instantly became excited, and his eyes turned red. Wasn't the transcendence he had painstakingly sought to enter the Heaven Chief realm? Now, he finally had a glimmer of hope. After receiving the news, the old man calmed down and didn't say anything else. As for Amethyst Elder, He had a conflict with Hades' era. Naturally, Bufang didn't care. After dealing with everything, Bufang left the Grand Hall and returned to his room. It was time for him to think about how to deal with Enai Yan's injuries. System, is there any way to repair Enai Yan's spirit sea? Bufang asked the system. Bufang didn't expect the system to answer him. He just asked instinctively. His mind was still trying to think of a solution. However, beyond his expectations, the system actually answered him this time. If you want to repair your spirit sea, the host can cook dishes that can nourish your mental force. The system has selected the dishes that the host can cook to repair the spirit sea. The system's serious voice rang out, causing Bufang to be slightly bewildered. Then, Bufang was delighted. There was still a chance? Dishes that can repair mental injuries. Dragon meat stewed with immortal ginseng, Chilan hoof, black tortoise dragon bone stewed, phoenix egg fried rice. While Bufang was dumbfounded, the system read out the names of the 4 dishes. Hearing the names of the dishes, the corners of Bufang's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Could it not be so domineering? Every time it opened its mouth, it would say dragon meat, Chilan. Those were all freaking ancient divine beasts. Up until now, the ancient divine beast that Bufang had met was only the Taotai, and it only had the Taoya's heart. The dishes that the system had listed were too unattainable. Bufang smacked his lips, his expression a little conflicted. All of a sudden Bufang was stunned. Phoenix egg fried rice. It seemed like it was possible. If Bufang didn't remember wrongly, he still had a phoenix egg in the restaurant. If the phoenix egg was added with good quality dragon blood rice, the phoenix egg fried rice should be able to meet the system's requirement. It should be able to repair the spirit sea, right? However, he had placed the phoenix egg in the cabinet of the Cloud Mist restaurant. If Bufang wanted to take the egg, he needed to rush to the Cloud Mist restaurant. Bufang rubbed his chin. He didn't hesitate for long before making his decision. The matter in the southern region of the Light Wind Empire was almost settled. He came here to help Enai Yan completely control the heavenly star catcher disc. Now that Enai Yan's spirit sea was injured, Bufang didn't have any other choice. When he returned to the Cloud Mist restaurant, Bufang could bring 80 to the Heaven and Earth farmland. There, 80 could finally run away. Without hesitation, Bufang dragged the snoring Lord Go up. He brought Enai Yan and Yu, preparing to leave the illusory spirit swamp's Serpentmen city. The netherworld ship rose into the sky. Lord Go yawned, and the fat on his body shook. He laid on the bow of the ship, enjoying the gentle wind as he continued to sleep. Yu clasped her hands, elegantly standing on the deck. The wind blew, fluttering her elegant black dress. Her exquisite face was expressionless. Enai Yan was placed in the cabin of the netherworld ship. Bufang also sat cross-legged on the deck. Hades' Era and Saint Daughter Ziyun also sat on the deck, surrounded by a group of people. Rumble! The netherworld ship soared into the sky, bringing with it a monstrous amount of nether energy and rolling waves. Soon, it sped away. With a whistling sound, it disappeared into the distance. Many experts of the Serpentmen city respectfully looked at the departing netherworld ship. Yu Fu's eyes were a little complicated. She put her palms together, watching Bufang leave. In her heart, she swore to improve her cooking skills. Amethyst Elder's figure streaked across the sky like lightning. He stood proudly in the sky, his face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Hades' Era had kidnapped his daughter again. Amethyst Elder's mouth twitched. He was so angry that his heart was twitching. The old man, with a tuft of white hair on his head, hovered in the sky. He gave Amethyst Elder a sidelong glance, chuckled, then clasped his hands and flew away. After being trapped in the Bronze Palace for thousands of years, the old man had finally escaped. The excitement in his heart was indescribable. At this moment, he couldn't wait to travel around the continent and then return to the Valley of Gluttony. The netherworld ship soared in the sky. When it passed by the Light Wind Empire, Bufang asked you to stop for a while. Bufang returned to Fong Fong's little store, informing Xiao Xiaolong and the others. When the people of the Light Wind Empire saw the Netherworld ship in the sky, they all knelt down to worship it. The Netherworld ship that saved them from danger, and you, were the goddesses in their hearts. Ha ha! The cursed Netherworld woman is being worshipped as a goddess? Interesting. Hades' Era poked his head out, looking at the scene of tens of thousands of people kneeling down below. He couldn't help but laugh. If you don't speak, no one will think that you're mute. You gave Hades' Era a sidelong glance, saying calmly. His figure soared into the sky, and Bufang once again landed on the Netherworld ship. He told Xiao Xiaolong about some matters and his insights on cooking, and it was about time to leave. You nodded. Her mind flickered, and the Netherworld ship instantly roared, turning into a jet of black light, tearing through the sky. Although the Netherworld ship's speed was fast, the southern region was tens of thousands of miles away from Heavenly Mist City. To reach there, it would take a while. While flying, a group of people sat on the deck of the Netherworld ship. Hades' Era rubbed his hands, staring at Bufang. Bufang, young man, shouldn't you fulfill your promise of spicy blood lobsters to I? Chapter 889. The Netherworld ship roared in the sky. Its speed was so fast that people couldn't even see it. It was just like a meteor. At this speed, it wouldn't take long to reach Heavenly Mist City. On the deck of the Netherworld ship, Hades' Era rubbed his hands, his eyes bright as he gazed at Bufang. He was poisoned by the blood lobsters, and he couldn't get rid of it even if he wanted to. The others turned around to look at him. Spicy blood lobster. Was it the new dish that owner Bu had developed? You and the others were a little skeptical. All of a sudden, their eyes brightened. The spicy blood lobster Hades' Era mentioned was the dish that Bufang had cooked in the Bronze Palace, right? If it was really that dish, Nethery and the others wouldn't be able to hold back their saliva. When they were in the Bronze Palace, the aroma that wafted in the air had thoroughly stirred up their minds. That aroma was both spicy and fragrant. With just a sniff, their appetites were completely stimulated. Bufang looked at Hades' Era. As the latter had mentioned it, he also wanted to eat the spicy blood lobster. This dish was so poisonous that people couldn't help but want to get rid of it. Not far from them, Lord Go's dog ears twitched, moving closer. Regarding the spicy blood lobster, Lord Go, who didn't like to eat lobsters, had to compromise. He could only blame the blood lobster for being too tantalizing. Bufang, young man, are you still worried about the little beauty in the cabin? Don't worry. Although I can't fix her spirit sea, I can stop it from spreading. Hades' Era looked at Bufang, rubbing his hands as he continued. He had taken 3 spicy blood lobsters at once. 1 finger for 1 lobster, so it wasn't a loss. I just need her to control the heavenly star catcher disc to help me brew wine. It's a really good wine, said Bufang, looking at Hades. Come on, do you think I don't know you youngsters? Look at your face, I can see through the worry you have for that little beauty. Hades' Era grinned and waved his hand at Bufang. Bufang was taken aback. He raised his hand and touched his face. Was his reaction that obvious? Sitting next to Bufang, Yu's pretty face turned even colder. She squinted at Hades' Era and snorted coldly. Saint Daughter Ziyun raised her eyebrows as if she had sensed the awkwardness in the atmosphere. She quickly pulled Hades' Era, who was still laughing ambiguously. Shut up. I'm talking about something important, Hades' Era said. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his heart as he met Yu's ice-cold gaze. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak, Yu said expressionlessly. This little girl's temper was really bad lately. Hades' Era smacked his lips awkwardly. His eyes turned to Bufang. He grinned and began to talk about the spicy blood lobsters. Bufang's face became calm again. He waved his hand. Instantly, thudding sounds echoed. A pile of blood lobsters appeared on the deck of the boat. They were the blood lobsters he had fished up in the lake. They were huge, and their meat was plentiful. Looking at those blood lobsters, Hades' eyes reddened, and his saliva dripped from his mouth. Bufang looked at the blood lobsters, sinking into his thoughts. He was thinking if he should set up an area in the farmland to raise these blood lobsters. Otherwise, after he finished eating these blood lobsters, he would run out of stock. After thinking for a while, Bufang kept some blood lobsters to raise them. As for the others, he began to process them and prepare to cook them. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Everybody was dazzled as they watched Bufang quickly process the blood lobsters. The more Hades watched, the more excited he became. That's right. This familiar feeling was the spicy blood lobster that had poisoned him. Sizzle! Sizzle! The netherworld ship sped across the sky, accompanied by the sound of stir-frying and the rolling aroma. Gulp! 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 On the netherworld ship, everybody stared at the black turtle constellation walk. The thick spicy aroma had already lingered on the netherworld ship. Lord Go, who was lying at the side, also lifted his head, moving to Bufang's side. Bufang held the black turtle constellation wok in one hand and the spatula in the other, skillfully flipping the wok. The blood lobsters in the wok splashed with the oily juice, rolling and rolling. Under the sunlight, they sparkled with dazzling light, dazzling people's eyes. Together with the steaming steam and the thick aroma, it provoked people's taste buds. Hades' saliva almost dripped on the ground. Lord Go also widened his eyes, a little excited. You stared, her eyes focused. Saint Daughter Ziyun squinted, sniffing the aroma lingering in the air. Sizzle. After pouring the ice heart jade urn wine, white steam soared into the sky. After Bufang flipped it a few times, it was taken out of the wok. The blood lobsters were poured into the prepared plate. After pouring the thick, fragrant, steaming gravy, a serving of spicy blood lobster was done. The kitchen knife slashed horizontally, cutting open the back of each lobster, revealing the tender meat inside. Hades' couldn't wait any longer. The moment the dish was done, he quickly grabbed 3 lobsters and put them on his plate. He didn't care about the unceasingly dripping oily juice. Twisting the lobster's head, he opened his mouth and began to suck the delicious gravy. Ah! It's this feeling. So delicious, so spicy and fragrant. Hades' face blushed. He closed his eyes in bliss, his body shivering as if he was electrocuted. Lord Go skillfully shoved the lobster into his mouth. The others looked at Bufang. Facing this spicy blood lobster, they didn't know how to eat it. After Bufang showed them how to eat it, the others also began to eat. After you swallowed a blood lobster, her eyes widened. Her face, which was as calm as an ancient well, revealed a surprised look. 1, 2, 3 This woman ate the lobsters really fast. In the sky, the netherworld ship crossed. The inside of the ship was bustling with activity. A group of people was excitedly eating the spicy blood lobsters. The aroma spread in the sky. From time to time, lobster shells fell from the ship. The night retreated and dawn arrived. When the sun rose from the horizon, the heavenly mist city, which had been quiet for a whole night, began to wake up. The bronze gate of the Cloud Mist restaurant was pushed open. Sunlight shone through the open gate, making the restaurant a little warmer. The snow that had fallen for a whole night also stopped, piling up on the ground. The majestic young Meiji walked out of the restaurant with a broom in her hand, carefully sweeping away the accumulated snow in front of the door. Another beautiful day. Inside the restaurant, a soft female voice rang out. Then, a figure with a voluptuous figure walked out and leaned against the door. This person was Sorceress and Sheng. Sorceress and Sheng's voluptuous figure was as eye-catching as ever. Even though she had changed into a looser chef robe, it still couldn't hide her magnificent chest. The robe on her chest was about to burst open. Her beautiful face had a hint of laziness, as if she had just woken up. Leaning against the door, she looked at young Meiji, who was sweeping the floor. Her nose let out a soft hum. And Shing, don't cause trouble so early in the morning. After sweeping the snow in front of the door, we need to go in and practice our cooking skills. Knife skills, carving skills we need to practice. Yang Meiji's arms bulged, sweeping away a pile of snow. Her eyes turned and landed on Shing, who was leaning against the door gently. And Shing looked at Yang Meiji with misty eyes. She stretched out a finger, pointing at her red lips. Little Gigi, don't be anxious. It's such a beautiful day, so let's enjoy it. Owner Boo isn't here, so he won't know if we slack off. Moreover, we are all women, so we need to treat ourselves better. When it's time to rest, we need to rest. Don't call me Little Gigi. Please call me Yang Meiji. Although Owner Boo isn't here, we still need to improve our cooking skills, so we need to practice. Otherwise, when Owner Boo comes back to test our cooking skills, he will be angry. Yang Meiji exerted more strength in her arms. She raised the broom, sweeping away a large pile of snow. It piled up on both sides, clearing a path. No way. Owner Boo won't come back. Even if we practice cooking skills, we need to strike a balance between work and rest. Even if Owner Boo gets angry, Owner Boo won't do anything to us. Would Owner Boo dare to spank my butt? Sorceress and Shing chuckled. Her voluptuous body slightly rose, and she stuck out her plump butt, giving Yang Meiji a flirtatious look. Yang Meiji was speechless as she looked at this woman. In the distance, two figures slowly walked over. When Yang Meiji saw those figures, her body stiffened. Her face flushed red, and she was so nervous that she couldn't speak. When Sorceress and Shing saw them, she burst out laughing. Little Gigi, your lover is here. You have to perform well today. Nangong Wuk and Nangong Wan came together. Every day they would come to the restaurant to eat. From afar, Nangong Wuk saw Yang Meiji, who was sweeping the snow, and Sorceress and Shing, who was leaning against the door, exuding charm. Big-breasted girl, Little Gigi, good morning. Nangong Wuk grinned, waving his hand at Yang Meiji. Yang Meiji's flushed face stiffened, and she was speechless. Don't call me Little Gigi. Please call me Madam Yang Meiji. Yang Meiji corrected him seriously. Nangong Wuk grinned. All of a sudden, a violent rumble resounded. The four of them were stunned, and they couldn't help but raise their heads. In the sky, they saw a black netherworld ship rapidly descending. Nangong Wuk looked at the netherworld ship, which was getting bigger and bigger in his eyes. His pupils shrank, and he quickly dashed out. A wave of energy rolled. White snow swirled. The netherworld ship stopped in front of the door. Sorceress and Shing looked at the stopped netherworld ship in a daze, and the corners of her mouth twitched. She suddenly had a bad premonition. Could it be that Owner Boo had returned? A few figures walked down from the netherworld ship. You narrowed her eyes. Her delicate hand was still holding a spicy blood lobster, which was dripping with oil. She walked down from the netherworld ship and landed in front of Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk looked at you, and his hair stood on end. You, sister. Nangong Wuk was still afraid of you, so he opened his mouth. You looked at Nangong Wuk in astonishment. She opened her red lips, which were stained with oil, and burped. A spicy aroma wafted out, and Nangong Wuk's body shivered. What was this smell? It smelled King good. Then, many figures walked down from the netherworld ship. Hades Era looked at you with a hopeless face. He couldn't eat the blood lobsters faster than this little girl. He was poisoned by the blood lobsters, but he still couldn't eat the lobsters faster than this little girl. His heart ached. His heart ached. How many blood lobsters had he missed out on? Like a frosted eggplant, Hades Era was exhausted. He held a spicy strip in his mouth to relieve his melancholy. Yang Meiji and Sorceress and Shing saw Bu Fong walking down from the netherworld ship. Yang Meiji was elated, while Sorceress and Shing wore a sad face. Sorceress and Shing felt that she had jinxed it. Why did that damned Owner Boo come back? Oh, you're all here. Long time no see. How's your cooking practice? Bufang looked at Yang Meiji and Sorceress and Xing, the corners of his mouth rising as he asked with a gentle face. Chapter 890. Bufang's appearance surprised Yang Meiji and Sorceress and Xing. They had never thought that Bufang would descend from the sky in such a sudden manner. Yang Meiji didn't say anything. She looked at Bufang with joy in her eyes. Sorceress and Xing felt embarrassed. Recently, she had been slacking off a lot. Their expressions fell into Bufang's eyes. Bufang saw through their thoughts at first glance. Bufang arched his brows, but he didn't say anything. Clasping his hands, he walked toward the Cloud Mist restaurant. When Nangong Wuk saw Bufang, his eyes sparkled. The fear he had for you had dissipated a lot. Old Bu, you're finally back. I missed you so much. Nangong Wuk took 2 steps and quickly arrived at Bufang's side. Bufang cast a sidelong glance at Nangong Wuk, and the corners of his mouth rose into a gentle smile as he nodded. Sorceress and Xing's smile was a little awkward. She looked at Bufang, not knowing what to do. Owner Bu still doesn't play by the rules. When Bufang walked past Sorceress and Xing, he gave her a cold look. Don't talk. Come in. I'm going to test your cooking skills. He really wants to test me? Sorceress and Xing revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. You're the boss. You call the shots. Yang Meiji put the broom aside, dusted her hands, and excitedly followed behind Bufang. Sorceress and Xing followed, looking as if she didn't have anything to hold on to. The laziness she had when she just woke up had disappeared. You and the others also entered the restaurant. Saint Daughter Ziyun was a little curious about this place. Her eyes were filled with surprise. This restaurant looked very similar to the restaurants in the Valley of Gluttony. How many branches does Owner Bu have? Saint Daughter Ziyun was really curious. As soon as Bufang entered the restaurant, 80 happily ran around the restaurant. When it saw Bufang, it paused for a moment and clucked. Then, it flapped its wings and continued running. As long as he was alive, little Eighth would not stop running. Bufang glanced at 80, who was playing around, and felt that he should give him a wider world to play around in. The system farmland was the best choice. That gaze caused 80's body to tremble, and the feathers on its body seemed to tense up. His head swiveled as he looked around. Bufang did not make a move, but stepped into the kitchen. Behind him was the excited Yang Meiji and the dejected Sorceress and Xing. After entering the kitchen, Bufang announced the test. He asked the 2 of them to cook their best dishes for him to taste. Yang Meiji was so excited. She held the kitchen knife and chopped on the chopping board. He patted his chest loudly. Owner Bu, just you wait. I, Yang Meiji, won't let you down. Sorceress and Xing held the kitchen knife listlessly. It's over. Will Owner Bu spank my butt? Under Bufang's stern gaze, the 2 of them started to cook on their own stoves. While the 2 of them were cooking, Bufang walked up to the counter and opened it. Immediately, a rich amount of spirit energy gushed out. A phoenix egg that was glowing with a lustrous radiance was quietly sitting inside. Bufang had a deep impression of this phoenix egg. No matter what, he had met you when he got this phoenix egg. You had said that she needed the life energy in the phoenix egg to disperse the death energy and curse in her body. However, with Bufang's many delicious dishes, the death energy and curse in Yu's body had faded a lot. Especially the death energy, it was almost gone. That was why the phoenix egg had been kept there. Today, since he wanted to cook phoenix egg fried rice, Bufang took it out. Holding the phoenix egg in one hand, Bufang walked around Yang Meiji and Sorceress and Xing's stoves, carefully watching their cooking process. Yang Meiji was cooking sweet and sour ribs. She looked good and skilled. Sorceress and Xing was cooking fish head tofu soup. Bufang gave Sorceress and Xing a meaningful look. This woman seems like she has been slacking a lot. He didn't watch them cook anymore. No matter what, with him around, they would be a little nervous. When you're done, bring the dish out for me to taste. Before Bufang walked out of the kitchen, He looked at the two and said. Sorceress and Xing revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. You're the boss. As long as you're happy. Yang Meiji was very confident. She nodded heavily. Owner Bu, I won't let you down. Bufang walked out of the kitchen, entering the restaurant. Everyone's eyes were instantly attracted by the phoenix egg in Bufang's hand. That egg looked very cool. It emitted a sparkling radiance, and a strong vitality could be felt. Nethery's eyes lit up as soon as she saw the phoenix egg. My egg, you said. Bufang looked at you, feeling a headache coming on. Why did this woman still remember this phoenix egg? This is my egg, Nethery said solemnly once again. She still remembered that Bufang had told her how to eat the phoenix egg. She remembered it clearly. Bufang held the phoenix egg, his mouth twitching. Let's make a deal. 5 servings of dragon blood rice for 1 phoenix egg. What do you think? Bufang thought for a while, then said. He could only use food to tempt her. You looked at Bufang, her face emotionless. Her red lips parted. I don't want it. Bufang's body stiffened. Even the dragon blood rice couldn't tempt this woman? Why was she so obsessed with the phoenix egg? I want 10 fragrant spicy blood lobsters. You thought for a while, then said. Tui. Not far from them, Hades' Era, who was drinking water, couldn't help but spit it out. This girl was demanding an exorbitant price. How could the stingy young man Bufang agree to her request? He had to use 3 fingers to exchange for 3 blood lobsters, and this girl wanted 10. She was really shameless. Hades' Era was looking forward to seeing you being rejected by Bufang. However, he was dumbstruck shortly after. Because Bufang had considered the pros and cons. Eventually he said, Okay, I agree with you. What the heck? What's going on? Bufang, young man, you've changed. You weren't like this in the past. How could you agree to such a humiliating request? Hades' Era felt that the impact was even more severe than being slapped by the black dog. I object. Why can this girl exchange for 10 blood lobsters? Hades' Era asked indignantly. You glanced at Hades' Era expressionlessly and said, No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. Hades' Era's body stiffened. This girl was really irritable recently. Bufang looked at Hades' Era and shrugged. Objection invalid. If he wanted to save her, he had to sacrifice this phoenix egg. 10 blood lobsters was something he couldn't do anything about. Yu's long black hair fluttered slightly. She snorted and sat on the chair. Not long after, Yang Meiji and Yu walked out of the kitchen with dishes in their hands. Yang Meiji was holding a bowl of fragrant sweet and sour ribs. Lord Go's eyes lit up as he laid under the path understanding tree. However, Lord Go didn't crave sweet and sour ribs that much after eating the spicy crayfish. Sticking out his tongue and licking his lips, Lord Go couldn't help but mutter in his heart. This spicy blood lobster was really poisonous. Bufang placed the phoenix egg on the table, attracting everyone's attention. Meanwhile, Bufang was ready to taste the dishes made by the 2 chef apprentices. Yang Meiji was very confident as she placed the sweet and sour ribs in front of Bufang. Sorceress and Xing sighed and placed the steaming hot fish head tofu soup on the table. Bufang took out his chopsticks and balanced them. Then, he reached out and picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs. The ribs were red, and the sauce emitted an enchanting aroma. When he picked it up, a sticky thread appeared. Opening his mouth, the ribs entered his mouth. After chewing for a while, the tender texture burst out in his mouth. The fragrance of the meat and the sauce blended together, bringing out the best in each other. Bufang's brows couldn't help but twitch. This Yang Meiji's cooking skills had improved a lot. Not bad, but there are still some flaws. Bufang chewed and said, when the ribs were oiled, the heat control was a little off. The ribs were a little tough, and the knife skills weren't good enough. There were some mistakes in the sauce. Everything else is not bad. Not bad. I can see that you've been practicing very seriously. Listening to Bufang's comments, Yang Meiji's face was full of excitement. This Cloud Mist restaurant was originally her family's restaurant. Now, as a chef, she was working hard to fulfill her father's dream. She didn't dare to slack off. Being able to receive Bufang's praise, she was really excited. She also carefully noted down Bufang's suggestions. She thought about it carefully and found that there were indeed some mistakes in these points. It was Sorceress and Sheng's fish head tofu soup. Sorceress and Sheng's heart instantly trembled. She even looked at Bufang with a little fear. He seemed to feel Sorceress and Sheng's fearful eyes. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. He scooped a bowl of soup into a porcelain bowl, then picked up a piece of fish and a piece of tofu. Slurp. The fish head tofu soup, which was as smooth as milk, instantly entered his mouth. The aroma burst out. Bufang's face didn't change. He picked up the fish and put it in his mouth. His face still didn't change. He picked up the tofu and put it in his mouth. Then, he put down the porcelain bowl and chopsticks, indifferently looking at Sorceress and Sheng. The others curiously looked at Bufang. They didn't know what Bufang would say about this dish, but they felt that it wasn't bad. The aroma lingering in the air also increased people's appetite. Even if I don't say it, you should know what you did wrong, right? Bufang said, his face expressionless. Sorceress and Sheng nodded obediently like a chick pecking rice. First of all, your knife skills lack practice. The size of the tofu is different, which affects the taste. The processing of the fish is also wrong. You didn't even scrape the fish scales clean. Secondly, the control of the fire. This dish is a test of fire control. The slightest deviation will cause the taste to be completely different. Sorceress and Sheng didn't dare to breathe loudly after hearing Bufang's indifferent comment. It was the first time they saw Bufang being so strict. The others didn't say anything. Sorceress and Sheng continued to nod like a chick pecking rice. At this moment, she didn't dare to say anything. I won't say anything else. From this dish, I can see that you are always lazy. Bufang stood up, indifferently looking at Sorceress and Sheng. He walked toward the kitchen, and Sorceress and Sheng quickly followed him. After entering the kitchen, Bufang took out one white radish after another from the cupboard. The white radishes piled up into a small mountain. Sorceress and Sheng's face was blank. Then, she started to cry. Owner Bu, don't beg for mercy. Cut these radishes and you can be free. This is your punishment for being lazy and losing the cooking competition, Bufang said. Then, he passed the heavy, pitch-black kitchen knife on his stove to Sorceress and Sheng. Holding the heavy kitchen knife, Sorceress and Sheng started to cry even more. That naughty owner Bufang nodded, turned around and walked out of the kitchen. When he reached the door, he looked at Sorceress and Sheng, who wanted to cry but had no tears. He said seriously, "Good luck. I believe in you." Then, Bufang walked out of the kitchen. Next, he should start to prepare the phoenix egg fried rice. Chapter 891. Phoenix egg fried rice was a dish cooked with a phoenix egg and high-quality dragon blood rice. It was filled with dense essence energy, which had a strong healing effect. After all, it was a divine beast egg, and the divine energy contained within the divine beast's ingredient had a strong healing power. Although Enai Yan's spirit sea was injured, using the divine beast egg was enough to heal it. After all, Enai Yan's cultivation base wasn't strong, and her spirit sea wasn't as terrifying as a divine spirit realm expert. In the kitchen, Sorceress and Sheng's face was filled with despair as she chopped the radish. Chopping the radish required skill, and it wasn't something that could be done casually. Since she wanted to practice her knife skills, Bufang had strict requirements for her. The space between each piece of radish had to be the same, and there shouldn't be too much of a difference. Hence, every time she chopped, Sorceress and Sheng had to consider the distance between her knife. If it was too wide or too narrow, it would affect her. If she made too many mistakes, with Owner Bu's temper, he would increase her punishment. Who knows, it wouldn't be one pile of radish, but 2 piles of radish. In the kitchen, besides Sorceress and Sheng, who was bitterly chopping the radish, Bufang was standing in front of the stove, holding the phoenix egg. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. He had cooked egg-fried rice many times, but it was Bufang's first time cooking phoenix egg-fried rice. Moreover, he couldn't make too many mistakes. Once he made a mistake, he wouldn't have a chance to recover. After all, he only had 1 phoenix egg in his hand. If he made a mistake and destroyed the egg-fried rice, An Yin wouldn't have a chance to be saved. Whether it was for An Yin or the dignity of his culinary skills, Bufang wouldn't allow himself to make any mistakes. Hence, this time, Bufang had to cook the phoenix egg-fried rice with all his might. His surging spirit sea gradually calmed down. Bufang opened his eyes and his aura suddenly changed. At Bufang's level, he no longer used true energy to cook. He used his mental force to cook. After all, mental force was more sensitive, and it could sense the slightest change in the energy of the ingredients. Bufang calmed his mind and calmed down. His face was expressionless. The vermilion robe on his body fluttered even though there was no wind, and his hair slowly fluttered. Tying up his hair with a velvet rope, Bufang's aura suddenly changed. A dragon's roar resounded in his spirit sea. The roar soared into the sky and set off huge spirit waves in his spirit sea. Buzz, a powerful wave of spiritual force, immediately spread out. Bufang didn't know how strong his mental energy was, but at least it wouldn't be weaker than Amethyst Elders. After all, when he was at the Divine Soul Realm with a one-step soul ladder, his mental energy was almost comparable to the Divine Spirit Realm. His mental fluctuations seemed to have turned into ripples that spread out in all directions. Sorceress and Sheng, who was in the kitchen, raised her head in fear. Her hand, which was holding the black kitchen knife, trembled slightly. She was surprised and horrified. She looked at Onerbu, who was standing in front of the stove. Onerbu's aura had changed drastically. How terrifying! Was that really Onerbu? When did that serious Onerbu become so terrifying? Even the Pill Palace's master didn't have such power. Sorceress and Sheng didn't know that Bufang's power had completely suppressed the Pill Palace's master. No matter if it was his true energy cultivation or his mental force, he was completely suppressed. In the restaurant, many people squinted their eyes. Sensing the spiritual fluctuations in the air, they were a little surprised. Lord Go and Hades' era didn't care, but the others were a little frightened. Even Yu was a little surprised. She still remembered the first time she met Bufang. At that time, Bufang's mental force was pitifully weak. In the kitchen, Bufang's mental force fluctuated unceasingly, rumbling and expanding. He took out the dragon blood rice that was glowing brightly. This was the dragon blood rice that Bufang had exchanged from the system. He had spent a lot of money to exchange for the dragon blood rice that he could exchange for with his current qualifications. Although this dragon blood rice wasn't watered with the blood of a true dragon, it was still extraordinary. It was enough to match with this phoenix egg, which wasn't considered a top-grade product. Under Bufang's mental perception, the phoenix egg was like a dazzling sun. The light was dazzling and dazzling, constantly spreading everywhere. In the center of that light, there seemed to be a phoenix's cry echoing. A small golden phoenix's shadow was moving. Golden light flashed in Bufang's hand, and the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. The dragon's roar reached the sky, and a divine dragon shadow hovered around the kitchen knife. Bufang held the kitchen knife with one hand. His eyes focused, staring at the phoenix egg. In a blink of an eye, he slashed. This slash seemed to tear the darkness. In Bufang's mental perception, this slash was as fast as lightning, as though it wanted to tear his mental force apart. His heart slightly palpitated. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The kitchen knife spun in Bufang's hand, twirling and twirling. In the end, it turned into a wisp of green smoke and dispersed. In the distance, Sorceress and Xing gawked and dropped her jaw. She had almost forgotten her task as her eyes were glued to Bufang's movements. She suddenly felt that her punishment this time wasn't bad. She was actually able to witness Honorbu's cooking skills. This was a kind of luck. That slash just now was so exquisite that it made her heart and soul tremble. So, when the knife skill reached the pinnacle, it was like this. The knife left no trace. From the surface, it didn't look like the egg had been cut into pieces. If it were her, with this slash, the eggshell would have shattered. Honorbu, worthy of being Honorbu. She seemed to understand the reason why Bufang asked her to cut the radish. How could cutting a radish reach such a level of knife skill? Bufang raised his hand, gently patting the top of the eggshell. Instantly, the top of the eggshell was slapped open. Thick essence, energy, and life force burst out from the eggshell. The light shot up to the sky, dazzling and eye-catching. Sorceress and Xing was so scared that her towering breasts trembled unceasingly. What a thick life force! It was simply suffocating. Bufang placed the eggshell on the stove. His face didn't change at all. He raised his hand, his mental force still sensing the eggshell. In the next instant, he raised his palm. The mental force in his mind seemed to turn into a tornado, sweeping out and gathering above the phoenix egg. Swoosh! A loud and clear phoenix cry shot up to the sky. The light shooting out from the eggshell was crushed. Bufang's mental force gathered in the sky, turning into a funnel vortex, stirring the egg liquid inside. The egg yolk and the egg white mixed together, turning into an orange-yellow egg liquid. Bufang's spirit sea was boiling, and the gold dragon soul was roaring. Instantly, the egg liquid was extracted from the phoenix egg. Under the mental force tornado, it turned into a roaring divine dragon. The phoenix cried, and the divine dragon danced. This scene dazzled Sorceress and Xing, and she looked as though she was intoxicated. Is he cooking? Is this a King acrobatic show? How could a dish create a dragon and phoenix? Bufang raised his hand, waving it. Instantly, the divine dragon formed by the egg liquid poured into the blue and white porcelain bowl that Bufang had prepared. The bowl was full, and the egg liquid was still swirling in the bowl. The blue and white porcelain bowl seemed to be unable to withstand the rich life force of the phoenix egg liquid, and it seemed as though it would explode at any moment. Bufang took out many spirit herbs from the system-dimensional bag. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared again, and he minced the ingredients. He squeezed out the juice and mixed it with the egg liquid. The egg liquid spun, mixing the spirit herbs juice with it. After that, Bufang began to prepare for the next step. He took out the dragon blood rice he had exchanged from the system. This time, the dragon blood rice's grade was much higher. Just by holding it in his hand, he could feel its vitality. If I use this dragon blood rice to make dragon blood rice, you will like it a lot, right? This thought popped up in Bufang's head. However, shortly after, he dispelled this thought. That was because he felt that Nethery would like the spicy blood lobster more now. It seemed he had to carry out his plan to raise the blood lobsters in the heaven and earth farmland as soon as possible. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to see many ways to eat the blood lobsters. No matter what, Bufang could only catch so many blood lobsters in the blood-red lake. If he ate them all, he would finish them all. Bufang poured the heavenly mountain spirit spring water into the dragon blood rice. After washing it, he poured the rice water away. Although the dragon blood rice was blood-red, the rice water didn't have a trace of blood. If it were low-grade dragon blood rice, the rice water would have some blood-red impurities. This was the difference between top-grade dragon blood rice and low-grade dragon blood rice. All the preparations were done. Bufang opened his mouth, spitting out a dark gold flame. It was the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Instantly, the terrifying heat expanded in the air. Sorceress and Xing's eyes brightened. Honorbu was finally going to show his real skills? He lit the fire and heated the wok. The black turtle constellation wok emitted a dark yellow hue. Sizzle! Sizzle! As the egg liquid entered the wok, a wave of fragrance exploded like a bomb. It was sudden and fast. In just a blink of an eye, Sorceress and Xing was enveloped by this aroma. It was an egg aroma that she had never smelled before. As Bufang's apprentice, she had cooked a lot of egg fried rice. When it came to the egg aroma, she didn't even need to close her eyes to guess what kind of spirit beast's egg it was. However, this time, the egg aroma was beyond her imagination. She stared blankly at Bufang's back, and her eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration. The richer the spirit energy, the higher the energy, and the stricter the requirements for the chef. Not only was the cooking method strict, but the mental force and physique were also strict. Bufang held the wok in one hand and the wok in the other. He shook the wok and stir-fried it in one go. The black turtle constellation wok collided with the stove, bringing with it a melodious rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. Every time they collided, the egg and rice in the wok would fly out. Golden light flashed and overflowed in all directions. Beams of light burst forth. Above the black turtle constellation wok, steam and aroma filled the air. It turned into a phoenix dancing in the sky, and a divine dragon roared. This mythical scene shocked Sorceress and Xing. Bufang's face was solemn. His mental force swept out, locking on the dish in the black turtle constellation wok. Every time he flipped the wok and stir-fried, it would consume a large amount of his mental force. The egg and the dragon blood rice were like bottomless pits, crazily sucking away the mental force in his spirit sea. A chef would pour all of his heart and soul into a truly delicious dish. That was the reason why some chefs could only cook one dish with all their heart and soul. To cook one dish, a chef's spirit, energy, and soul were all used up. It was enough to show how precious this dish was. Boom, boom. Flames soared into the sky. The phoenix danced, and the divine dragon meandered. The dazzling scene was still unfolding before their eyes. All of a sudden, after the last shake, the black turtle constellation wok collided with the stove for the last time. The phoenix flew away, and the divine dragon dispersed. The long and narrow blue and white porcelain plate was prepared. With a shake of the wok, the dazzling dish came out of the wok. Bufang poured the steaming hot dish onto the plate. The slightly thick egg mixed with the dragon blood rice was placed on the plate. The egg was like silk, its fragrance overwhelming. Sorceress and Xing gawked, dropping her jaw. The kitchen knife in her hand fell on the stove with a thud, breaking the silence. Bufang retracted his mental force and exhaled a long breath. Phoenix egg fried rice. Done. Chapter 892. The billowing aroma filled the entire kitchen. Bufang was startled by Sorceress and Xing's actions. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at her. Sorceress and Xing hurriedly picked up the kitchen knife and looked at Bufang, revealing an awkward smile. However, while smiling, she couldn't help but twitch her nose, revealing an intoxicated expression. The aroma that filled the air was really too fragrant. It was so fragrant that it was intoxicating. Was this really egg-fried rice? How could egg-fried rice reach such a level? Owner Bu was indeed Owner Bu. Indeed, he couldn't be judged by common sense. In her heart, Sorceress and Xing's admiration for Bufang deepened. Bufang used a clean cloth to wipe off the stains around the porcelain plate. The blue and white porcelain plate shone brilliantly. Then, Bufang placed the dazzling egg-fried rice on the porcelain plate and took it away. The aroma lingered as Bufang lifted the porcelain plate. Don't be afraid. Continue cutting the radishes. You have to learn to get used to it. Bufang walked to the entrance of the kitchen, glancing at Sorceress and Xing as he calmly said. His words made Sorceress and Xing dumbfounded. Looking at Bufang's back as he left, Sorceress and Xing's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Indeed, Owner Bu was still the same Owner Bu. He was still the same Owner Bu who used a portion of stinky tofu to blow up the entire arena. Black-bellied scoundrel. He let out a sigh and took a deep breath of the rich fragrance in the air. Sorceress and Xing continued her boring and tasteless radish-cutting action. Bufang carried the shining egg-fried rice out of the kitchen. Soon, he arrived at the restaurant. Everyone's gaze instantly landed on him. Hades' Era and Lord Go's gazes landed on the egg-fried rice, and their eyes shone with a trace of light. After all, this was a bowl of egg-fried rice cooked with a divine beast egg. It really did look a little different from ordinary egg-fried rice. After placing the dishes on the table, Bufang's gaze swept across the crowd, and he saw astonishment in everyone's eyes. There was essence in the divine beast egg, but this essence was not that easy to absorb. Before you met Bufang, the best way to deal with the phoenix egg was to swallow it. However, this method of absorption would cause most of the energy to be lost. Even if he broke the egg and ate it, the absorption effect would not be very good. However, Bufang was different. Bufang's culinary skills could perfectly condense the essence of the ingredients, allowing it to be absorbed by the human body. It was much easier to expel curses. Although a portion of egg-fried rice could not completely retain the essence of the phoenix egg, the energy left behind was much more than that of an uncooked phoenix egg. But could this phoenix egg fried rice really save An Yen? An Yen's spiritual sea had shattered. Ordinary people would have died when their spirit sea shattered. An Yen had the heavenly star-catcher disk's power in her head, so she had not died yet. However, even so, if he wanted to save her, even an immortal couldn't do it. Even Hades could only prevent An Yen's spirit sea from shattering. Bufang lifted An Yen's body. At this moment An Yen's face was extremely pale, and she looked even more devoid of blood. Bufang frowned. Using a porcelain spoon, he scooped up a portion of golden egg-fried rice. Then, he shoved the egg-fried rice into An Yen's mouth. A portion of egg-fried rice entered her mouth. Bufang's mental force instantly expanded from his spirit sea, pushing An Yen's mouth to move. The egg-fried rice slid down her throat and into her stomach. Under Bufang's mental force, as soon as the egg-fried rice entered her stomach, it turned into surging energy. That energy was divided into two types: mental energy and physical energy. The two types of energy moved in her body, stimulating An Yen. Shortly after, An Yen's face turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. The color was very obvious, and it was even a little red. Her fair skin became redder, and eventually, it looked as if it was about to bleed. Bufang looked at it, scooped up another spoon, and shoved it into An Yen's mouth. Shortly after, a spoonful of phoenix egg-fried rice entered her stomach. Sizzle! A white mist spread out from An Yen's body, and her spirit sea seemed to have become more active. The surrounding people were all stunned. Yang Meiji looked at Bufang with a dull face. Looking at Owner Bu carefully feeding her the egg-fried rice spoonful by spoonful, she couldn't imagine that the meticulous and black-bellied Owner Bu in her memory overlapped with the man in front of her. She must have met a fake Owner Bu. Nangong Wan's eyes revealed a complicated expression, and she sighed deeply. Nangong Wuk's mouth opened into a circle, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It was as if he had seen a ghost. Just who was this woman? She could make Owner Bu feed her personally. This was a privilege that even he didn't have. Old Bu had changed. He wasn't like this before. Lord Go lifted his dog head, and his eyes focused on An Yen, who had just eaten the egg-fried rice cooked by the divine beast egg. His eyes became a little deep. Nether King Ha furrowed his brows. All of a sudden, the man and the dog's eyes shrank. Boom! A wave of energy emitted from An Yen's body, rolling and surging. Dots of starlight diffused, covering the entire restaurant in just a blink of an eye. The starlight wanted to break out of the restaurant, but the restaurant seemed to have a mysterious power that prevented the starlight from escaping. Lord Go seemed to have seen through everything. He grinned, revealing a playful smile. This doll has profited from a disaster. Nether King Ha was also very surprised. Then, He covered his face with one hand and laughed loudly. Worthy of being the man who could make spicy strips and spicy blood lobsters that made I fall in love with them. The starlight became thicker and thicker. Eventually, the entire restaurant turned into a sea of stars. Lord Go extended his exquisite dog paw, caressing the starlight. His dog eyes looked nostalgic, and his gentle and magnetic voice arose. Although it's just the Hidden Dragon Continent's heavenly star-catcher disc, if you can control it, it's still a great opportunity. It's not less than the opportunity to enter the Heaven Chief realm. A muffled grunt. And Yan's face reddened, so red that she looked like she was about to bleed. Eventually, blood oozed from her eyes and nose. Eventually, she coughed out a mouthful of blood. She slowly woke up. Buzz Bufong met Yan's eyes. In just a blink of an eye, Bufong felt his surging spirit sea become still. Everything was calm, so quiet that it was a little strange. Bufong was a little bewildered, his eyes blurry. Then, he felt a sense of danger. The gold divine dragon's roar echoed in his head, pulling him back to his senses. And Yan slowly woke up, her eyes gazing at Bufong, who was holding a porcelain spoon to feed her egg-fried rice. Starlight sparkled in her eyes. It seemed like crystals were gathering in them. She woke up? Everybody was startled. They couldn't believe it. That woman had woken up? Saint Daughter Ziyun was the most shocked one. Her spirit sea was shattered. If it were in the Hidden Dragon Royal Court, even the Saint Sovereign couldn't save her. But it was just a bowl of egg-fried rice. Even if it was cooked with a divine beast egg, it was still King egg-fried rice. A bowl of egg-fried rice could save someone from death? Who was this owner Bu? And Yen gazed at Bufong, her eyes rippling. A moment later, she stormed toward Bufong. Bufong was startled. Everybody in the restaurant couldn't help but exclaim. Nangong Wuk's mouth and eyes opened wide. Yu's cold face couldn't help but shiver. She gazed at the scene in the distance. Eventually, in front of everybody's shocked eyes, Yen snatched the porcelain spoon from Bufong's hand. Tears streamed down her face as she started to gobble down the egg-fried rice. She stuffed the golden egg-fried rice into her mouth unceasingly. A rich aroma filled the air. Essence energy filled the air, and energy rumbled. With every mouthful, Yen could feel her aura growing stronger by a few notches. However, she couldn't stop. She couldn't stop. She felt as though she had been starving for many years. Her spirit sea and her stomach were crazily craving for the egg-fried rice. The golden egg and the blood-red rice. The combination of the two emitted endless energy. Bufong scratched his head awkwardly. For a moment, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. This woman was really naughty. And Yen was like a reincarnated hungry ghost, crazily eating the egg-fried rice. While she was eating, her aura started to change, earth-shaking. The starlight that filled the sky quickly gathered towards her body, and in a short while, it had completely seeped into her body. However, Yen couldn't stop. The starlight disappeared, and the true energy on Yen's body started to change. It seemed like a mysterious energy was surging. Above Yen's head, the soul ladder emitted starlight. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. Shortly after, the starlight soul ladder had 9 steps, and the divine altar was formed. And Yen didn't seem to notice the change in her cultivation base. She was still eating the egg-fried rice. The corners of her mouth were stained with the golden egg liquid and the blood-red rice. Nangong Wuk and the others were dumbstruck. What happened? What happened to this world? Was that woman breaking through? This speed of breaking through. Was she on steroids? In just a blink of an eye, she had jumped from the Divine Soul Realm to the peak of the Divine Soul Realm. How could the gap between two people be so big? Or, Owner Bu's bowl of egg-fried rice had such a monstrous effect? However, what happened next made them dumbstruck. Tens of thousands of energies gathered on the dazzling divine altar. Very quickly, a flickering divine flame was formed. That divine flame looked like it could tear the sky. Starlight gathered, and the divine flame flickered. 1 divine flame, 2 divine flames, 3 divine flames. After 5 divine flames were created, the surging energy calmed down. At this moment, Anai Yen had finished the egg-fried rice on her plate. She licked the porcelain bowl. She exhaled a mouthful of murky air, her face contented. Finally, I'm full, thud. Anai Yen put the porcelain plate on the table. When she opened her eyes, it looked like starlight had torn the sky. Where's that bastard who ambushed me? I'm going to kill him and serve him with wine. Looking at Anai Yen, who was so lively and whose cultivation base had rocketed, even Lord Go and Hades' Era, who had seen many things, were speechless. This big-breasted, brainless woman, this time, he had really obtained a great opportunity. Chapter 893. Anai Yan's cultivation base skyrocketed, which was beyond people's estimation. Even Bufang had a confused look on his face. He used to think that his cultivation base was the fastest. No matter what, he had been accumulating for a long time under the system's support. Then, he broke through in just a blink of an eye. His cultivation base skyrocketed. In just a blink of an eye, he had reached the peak of the divine soul realm from the one soul ladder. However, when he saw Anai Yen, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. This woman was even more brutal than him. She had directly broken through from the divine soul realm with a one soul ladder to the divine spirit realm with 5 divine flames. How could it be? There should be a limit to the growth of one's cultivation base. If her cultivation base skyrocketed like Anai Yan's, her body should be able to endure that much energy, right? This was the doubt in many people's minds. The others usually broke through step by step. However, if they broke through like that, it would be a huge burden on their bodies. Facing people's doubts, Hades' Era couldn't help but cover his face with one hand, laughing out loud. That's why I said this big-breasted, brainless woman got a big chance. Big chance? Hades' Era's words made people bewildered. They didn't understand. If Hades' Era thought it was a big chance, it wasn't ordinary. Every world has a heavenly star-catcher disk. The heavenly star-catcher disk connects to the great path of heaven of this world. It's also the coordinates of this world on the boundless star road. Hades' Era covered his face, speaking with a heavy voice. Everybody was bewildered. What was going on with his heavy voice? The hidden dragon continent's heavenly star-catcher disk was destroyed. The great path of heaven is incomplete. The heavenly star-catcher disk wants to use this woman's body to reform. At that time, this woman will be the heavenly star-catcher disk, and the heavenly star-catcher disk will be this woman. However, at the same time, this woman will be affected by the great path. She will become an emotionless puppet, a puppet of the great path. Hades said. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and widened their eyes uncontrollably. Even Bufang couldn't help but shiver. Turns out there was such a thing. This so-called great path of heaven was really sinister. Then what do you mean by a blessing in disguise? Nangong Wook was extremely curious. He really wanted to have such a rocket-like cultivation speed. Hades' Era glanced at Nangong Wook, and the corners of his mouth curled up. He was quite familiar with Nangong Wook. Back then, the two of them were like the 2 tyrants of Heavenly Pill City. When they walked around Heavenly Pill City, nobody dared to provoke them. Thinking back to that period of time, it was really beautiful. At that time, he was holding a chili strip cooked by Onerbu in his mouth. He was wearing a pitch-black robe, and as he walked, the wind blew, causing his robe to flutter. At that time, they were pure and unpretentious. This woman was going to become the great path's puppet. Her head has the heavenly star-catcher disk. While she was with Onerbu, her body was gradually changed by the heavenly star-catcher disk's star energy. Now, her body has become the sacred star body, which is really powerful. Of course, it was to prepare for the great path. However, at the last moment, when she was about to fuse with the great path, the strongest demon king broke it with one finger. Her spirit sea exploded, and she was on the verge of death. Nether King Ha sat at the dining table, looking at the curious young people around him. The corners of his mouth rose, and he picked up a bowl of sour plum soup, gulping it down. Wiping the corners of his mouth, Hades continued, "This woman was going to die. However, she met the wise and divine eye. Hades used 3 fingers to stabilize her collapsing spirit sea, which saved her from dying. Then, Onerbu used a bowl of egg-fried rice cooked with the divine beast phoenix egg and dragon blood rice to repair her spirit sea, reviving her. Here comes the main point." Hades lowered his voice, glancing around with narrowed eyes. The eyes of Nangong Wuk and the others lit up, and they looked at Hades expectantly. Bufang furrowed his brows and listened attentively. Even Yen was very curious about it. Hades took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and was about to speak. However, in the end, he awkwardly scratched his head. "I also don't know how to explain it. Mangy dog, since this is an important moment, I will let you explain it to me." Everyone was speechless. Nangong Wuk didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he couldn't steady his body. One day, with a knife in hand, he could cut down all the dogs in this world. Lord Go rolled his eyes and snorted, but he didn't refuse. He knew that Hades really didn't know how to explain it. It's mainly because of Bu Fang's restaurant. If it weren't for this restaurant, the starlight would have spread to the entire heavenly pill city. At that time, this big-breasted, brainless woman would have become the Great Path's puppet. Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice arose. "However, in this restaurant, the star energy is restrained, and it's only within the restaurant's range. Moreover, the most important point is that the connection between the Great Path and the heavenly star-catcher disk has been cut off." Everybody listened attentively. Then, they seemed to understand the reason behind it, and their eyes widened. Bufang couldn't help but be moved. Was it because of the restaurant? Was it because of the system? "Lord Go, you mean? This woman has deceived the heavens will in Onerbu's restaurant, and she stole the chance to break through?" Lord Go nodded, and he didn't want to talk anymore. However, he couldn't help but look at Yen with admiration. This woman had completely controlled the heavenly star-catcher disk, and her future was immeasurable. That was the most mysterious and important power in the world. In the future, even if she stepped on the endless path of stars, this woman's opportunities would be limitless. Because this woman was favored by the Great Path. When a man compared himself to a dog, the dog would be angered to death. This mangy dog has cultivated for so many years, and he has only stolen a wisp of the Great Path's energy. Compared to this woman, it's really sad. Of course, the Great Path that this mangy dog has stolen is much more advanced than the Great Path of the Hidden Dragon Continent. No one knew when Nether King had taken out a spicy strip. He held it at the corner of his mouth, covering his face. Lord Go had stolen a wisp of the Great Path's energy? Everybody was surprised, looking at Lord Go. They all knew that Lord Go was strong, but they didn't know Lord Go's real cultivation base. Now, it seemed that Lord Go's cultivation base was really formidable. "What do you mean by steal?" "It's called snatching. Everybody is snatching. Why can't I snatch Lord Go's energy? Moreover, to snatch a wisp of the Great Path's energy, Lord Go has been weak for so long. It's a big loss." Lord Go rolled his eyes, yawning. He lay on the ground, snoring loudly. Nether King pursed his lips, muttering under his breath. His voice was full of jealousy. He was also envious, jealous, and hateful. And Yen was the one who was dumbfounded. She knew that she had been ambushed, but she didn't expect that she was still alive. When she was hit by the finger that covered the sky, she felt death envelop her completely. But now, she wasn't dead. She was alive and kicking, and her cultivation base had a big breakthrough. Moreover, She had completely controlled the heavenly star-catcher disc. What had happened while she was unconscious? No matter what kind of fortuitous encounter Ni Yen had obtained, Bufang let out a long breath. Ni Yen had woken up. Next, the scattered star brewing method should have some progress. The Acheron helplessness wine they had been waiting for a long time was about to be brewed. Bufang was a little excited. Ni Yan's eyes twinkled like stars. She became more beautiful, and her skin seemed to be covered in a layer of water, which was incomparably smooth. At this moment, she gritted her teeth. She was enraged to the extreme because of the strongest demon king who had almost killed her. I must slaughter that bastard who ambushed me and make it into a dish. Hidden Dragon Heaven Pass. It was a grand, majestic city hovering between layers of clouds. The city was tall, and its walls were ancient, with many traces of time left on them. 6 silhouettes stood on the city wall. As they stood there, their terrifying auras shot up into the sky, suppressing the entire world. Those 6 silhouettes were the Saint Sovereigns of the Holy Lands. The Heavenly Spring Holy Lands Saint Sovereign was killed, and only one of the 7 Saint Sovereigns was left. Instantly, the pressure on them became enormous. Rumble! On the other side of the Hidden Dragon Heaven Pass, thick nether energy was rolling. The sky was torn, revealing a massive slit, which looked like the edge of the world. Within that hole, there were stage eyeballs rolling about, an enormous figure that blotted out the sky and covered the sun walking about. Thunder rumbled, and nether energy shot up into the sky. On the other side of the slit was the ruined prison, one of the 3 prisons of the netherworld. Those walking experts were the top experts and demon masters of the ruined prison. All of a sudden, the eyes of the Saint Sovereigns, standing in front of the Hidden Dragon Heaven Pass, shot divine light. They focused, looking at the continent. There, a jet of pitch-black nether energy rolled like a meteor, tearing the sky. The 6 Saint Sovereigns and the experts of the Hidden Dragon Heaven Pass instantly tensed up. "Who's there?" A Saint Sovereign expert's eyes shone brightly as he shouted. His voice seemed to have the power of judgment, ear-splitting. The entire Heaven Pass was shaken. However, that shadow didn't stop. It continued to come. Rumble! Rumble! Terrifying waves of air exploded, sweeping through the entire world. The Saint Sovereign who had just shouted felt his hair stand on end. He released a long roar, and his figure rose into the air. 6 flickering divine flames burned above his head. Even the void was swaying under the divine flames burning. However, right after that, cackling laughter resounded from the black figure. A finger that seemed to cover the entire sky pointed out. That finger caused the Saint Sovereign's entire body to be shrouded in a chill. A fierce collision happened. That Saint Sovereign vomited blood with a pale gold light. He was sent backward, hitting the city wall of the Hidden Dragon Heaven Pass. The other Saint Sovereigns were frightened. The black air scattered, revealing a giant, muscular figure. It was the strongest demon king who had broken Ni Yan's spirit sea with one finger, stopping the heavenly star-catcher disc from fusing with the great path. The strongest demon king grinned. He didn't mind that he had defeated a Saint Sovereign with one finger. He lifted his head to look at the massive crack in the sky. His eyes focused. Space crack. Those bastards from the ruined prison want to invade this world? Inside the crack, many experts from the ruined prison saw the strongest demon king. Waves of terrifying aura shot up into the sky. Some were happy, some were roaring, and some were excited. All kinds of emotions burst out. Those demon kings from the ruined prison used their own methods to express their joy for the strongest demon king's return. I, the strongest demon king, am back. The Hidden Dragon continent is no longer our goal. Our goal is to occupy a seat in Earth prison. Therefore, this noble one must retrieve the opportunity that belongs to this noble one. The strongest demon king's hair tore the void, his eyes like torches. All of a sudden, his heart skipped a beat, and his face revealed a slight look of surprise. How could it be? How could the heavenly star-catcher disc recover? That woman got hit by my finger. She didn't die. Chapter 894. Yan's cultivation base had broken through, which was beyond everyone's estimation. Everyone felt speechless and envious as they watched his cultivation soar like a rocket. The others who had cultivated for dozens of years couldn't compare to this woman's cultivation base in just a breath's time. Comparing oneself to others was really irritating. On the contrary, Yan didn't feel anything. Perhaps it was because her cultivation base had broken through so fast that she wasn't surprised at all. She was just numb. After her cultivation base had broken through so much, at least she was more confident in dealing with the guy who had ambushed her. Although Bufang was surprised, he wasn't envious or jealous. No matter what, with the system, his cultivation base wasn't any slower than Yan's. Yan had shouted that she wanted to kill the strongest Demon King, but she didn't do it because she didn't know where the strongest Demon King had gone. In the restaurant, after Nangong Wuk and the others ate a dish cooked by Bufang, they left the restaurant in satisfaction. It had been a long time since they had tasted Owner Bu's dishes. Today they could eat it, which was a pleasant surprise. Late at night, everyone was silent. Bufang closed the restaurant's doors. He pulled a chair and sat in front of the table. 80 excitedly sprinted forward, its feathers fluttering in the wind as it ran. When it reached Bufang, it suddenly lifted its head to look at Bufang. Then, it clucked, then continued to walk forward. At this moment, Bufang was deep in thought. He was a little excited. Yan had finally recovered. Moreover, she had the heavenly star-catcher disc. Did it mean that Yan could give him the chance to cook the Acheron helplessness? After waiting for a long time for the Acheron helplessness, Bufang was really happy. However, it wasn't urgent. Bufang didn't ask Yan to teach him the scattered star wine brewing method. No matter what, Yan had gotten a blessing in disguise. At this moment, she was still bewildered, and she didn't really understand her own ability. Thus, even if he asked Yan to help him, she wouldn't be able to do much. He had to let her calm down first. As Bufang pondered, he began to study the farmland. He narrowed his eyes and stared at little 8, who was running wildly in the distance. His mind was racing. As he stood up, 80, who was running with its chicken legs, suddenly froze. In the next instant, it was locked on by Bufang, and a bad premonition shrouded its heart. It lifted its head, seeing a figure in front of it. Bufang raised his hand, picking up 80 from the ground. "Don't worry, I'll bring you to a wider world." "I'll take you to a wider world," said casually. Little 80 was dumbfounded. Could he refuse? However, before it could make a sound, the scene before its eyes changed. The sky is vast, the wilderness is boundless, the wind blows the grass low to see a wild lion. However, after chasing 80 for a while, the three-eyed wild lion felt a chill. Far from it, the fat chicken had dashed behind a human. That human, the three-eyed wild lion, was startled, but it was too late. Bufang was wearing the vermilion robe. His long hair fluttered in the wind. The three-eyed wild lion pounced on him. Bufang was a little surprised. This pure and unpretentious wild lion, Bufang sighed in his heart. Then, he raised his arm, which was wrapped in black and white bandages, and punched the lion head. Boom! That punch hit the three-eyed wild lion's head, sending it several meters away. Eventually, it landed hard on the ground. The three-eyed wild lion was bewildered. It struggled to get up from the ground, feeling wronged. Didn't he say he would let it eat chicken? From now on, this chicken is your little friend. You have to love and protect it. You can't eat it. Bufang said seriously to the three-eyed wild lion. The three-eyed wild lion rolled its eyes. That fat chicken was going to be its little friend? He was the three-eyed wild lion of the ruined prison, and his little friend was a chicken? Did this human mean that he was going to love this chicken from now on? The three-eyed wild lion roared, wanting to resist. However, Bufang raised his hand, his face emotionless. His black and white bandaged arm released an ear-splitting roar. All right, the wild lion admitted defeat. 80, who was hiding behind Bufang, craned its head, clucking at the three-eyed wild lion. Bufang was satisfied. He believed that 80 and Little 3 would get along well. Then, Bufang picked up the hoe, shouldered it, and walked toward the place where the wild lion had plowed. He wanted to use the hoe to dig the soil one more time. System, do you have any good seeds for cooking ingredients? Bufang asked the system in his mind as he dug through the soil. After a moment of silence, the system answered. Bufang's vision blurred, and a list of names emerged in front of him. In the distance, the three-eyed wild lion was lying on the ground weakly. 80, on the other hand, had retracted its wings and was walking back and forth in front of the wild lion. The three-eyed wild lion glanced at the fat chicken from time to time, drool dripping from its mouth. One look and he could tell that this little friend of his was delicious abyssal sky pepper seeds, hell acheron grass seeds, heavenly mountain white lotus seeds. Bufang looked at the dazzling panel in front of him. Looking at the densely packed seeds on the panel, he was overwhelmed with emotions. Many of the seeds here would become top-grade cooking ingredients after they grew up. So happy Bufang was really looking forward to it. If the host wants to get the panel seeds, you need to complete the required development of the farmland. After each stage of development, the host will receive a random seed from the system. The system's solemn and earnest voice rang out. Bufang was a little bewildered, but he nodded. The host can also bring ingredients from the outside world into the farmland, which will promote the farmland's development. The system continued. In short, there were many ways to get seeds. One was to bring the seeds from the outside world, and the other was to complete the development and receive the seeds from the system. To Bufang, these two methods weren't difficult at all. Bufang had started the development of the farmland, and the land was almost finished. Bufang thought that the first stage of the development would be completed soon. Exhaling gently, Bufang put down his hoe, walking to the slowly flowing river bank. The water of this small river was clear and sweet. The spirit energy in the water could make people feel relaxed and comfortable. The three-eyed wild lion didn't have anything to eat in this farmland, so it had to drink this river water. Anyway, it was full after drinking water. His mind flickered. Bufang took out some blood lobsters from the system-dimensional bag. They were tied up with thin rope. After the ropes were untied, those blood lobsters fell into the river. Swoosh! As soon as those blood lobsters fell into the river, they swam crazily. Shortly after, they plunged into the river. Standing on the shore, through the clear water, they could see the blood lobsters crawling slowly in the river bed. It was really magical. After raising the blood lobsters in the river, Bufang took out many ingredients that were originally stored in the system-dimensional bag. He also released some fish into the river. The clear river water made these fishes swim happily. The water in the river was bubbling and splashing. Bufang fiddled with it for a while, taking out many spirit herbs. He divided the renovated ground into an area that was specifically used to plant spirit herbs. He planted the spirit herbs neatly and in an orderly manner. The spirit herbs swayed in the wind, taking root in the soil and absorbing the nutrients. Bufang began to plan the land. The three-eyed wild lion had plowed the land for a long time, but it had just created two areas. One was for growing spirit herbs, and the other was for growing ingredients. Anyway, it was enough. Besides growing spirit herbs and ingredients, this farmland also had the function of raising creatures. At this moment, Bufang hadn't started to bring in creatures on a large scale. This was enough. He had finished the preliminary development. Buzz indeed, after Bufang had finished the preliminary development, the system's serious voice echoed in his head. The farmland's preliminary development is complete. Fiery heart cabbage seeds will be distributed. Chapter 895. Fiery Heart Cabbage Seed? The system's words bewildered Bufang. Cabbage seed? Could it grow cabbages? Squinting, Bufang stood still, rubbing his chin. Shortly after, Bufang's mind flickered. His palm glowed, and a bag of charcoal-like seeds appeared in his hand. It was the reward the system had given him, the fiery heart cabbage seed. As the name suggested, it was a cabbage seed. This kind of seed looked like charcoal, but it was a little hot. It emitted heat just like real charcoal. Holding it in his hand, the heat surged. After playing with it for a while, Bufang walked to a plot of land in the heaven and earth farmland. He carved out a small area and planted the cabbage seed the system had given him. Perhaps Bufang didn't know what kind of cabbage would grow from this kind of seed. Bufang took the bucket and filled it with the clear river water. Carrying the bucket, he walked to the field and poured the water into the clear river water 1 scoop at a time. Sizzle! It was like cold water being poured on burning charcoal. In just a blink of an eye, the soil covering the seeds emitted sizzling steam. When Bufang saw this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Could this thing really grow into food? Bufang still had some doubts in his heart. Not far from them, Adi seemed to be familiar with the three-eyed wild lion. It flapped its wings, flying across the vast world. The three-eyed wild lion opened its mouth, flying fast behind Adi. Bufang looked at this harmonious scene, nodding his head. His mind flickered, and he left the heaven and earth farmland, returning to the restaurant. Bufang sat on a chair in the restaurant, curling up. 2 crescent moons were shining in the sky. The moonlight shone through the restaurant's cracks, falling on Bufang's body, bringing him a little coldness. The room that originally belonged to Bufang was occupied by Yen. Bufang could only sit on the chair in a daze. After a while, he decided to go to the kitchen to cook a new dish. The sound of running water came from upstairs. Perhaps it was Yang Meiji or Yen taking a shower. Yang Meiji had lived in the restaurant for a long time, so she was familiar with this process. When Yen was in the Taotai restaurant, she stayed in Bufang's room. Thus, she wasn't as curious about the shower as she was at the beginning. Bufang sat on the chair, contemplating. The appearance of the Heaven Chief realm had given him a lot of pressure. The system once said that the path to becoming a god of cooking was not smooth. The further one went, the more difficult it would be, and the more dangerous it would be. Besides, the artifact spirit of the god of cooking set had lamented that Bufang would probably fall at the last step like his previous host. At first, Bufang did not take these words to heart. However, as his cultivation base increased, the people and things he met became stronger. The mysterious Heaven Chief realm had given Bufang a lot of pressure. The mysterious chef in the Bronze Palace had given Bufang a sense of danger. However, the greater the pressure, the more benefits he could get if he could resist it. After Bufang had swept through the Valley of Gluttony, the loneliness he had felt had disappeared. This was because he had found a stronger opponent. With his current cooking level, if he met the chef from the Heaven Chief realm, he would be crushed. Thus, Bufang had to work hard to improve his cooking level. After 3 years, he would enter the Heaven Chief realm and gain a firm foothold in the Heaven Chief realm. Exhaling gently, Bufang's eyes became firmer. In the dead of night, people always had wild thoughts. Even Bufang was like that. The sound of the chair rubbing against the floor arose. Bufang got up from the chair, slowly walking to the kitchen. If he had to work hard, he couldn't relax. He had to continue his cooking practice. The next day at dawn, as the dazzling sunlight shone down, Bufang walked out of the kitchen and rubbed his shoulders, which were exhausted from the night's work. His shoulders were a little sore, and he was a little tired. After practicing cooking for a whole night, Bufang felt a little dispirited. However, with Bufang's massive spirit sea, he could rest for a while, and he would be as lively as a dragon or a tiger. He opened the restaurant's door. Bufang pulled a chair, curling up at the door. Squinting, he felt the cold wind howling outside the door. This cold wind made Bufang feel comfortable. He closed his eyes, taking a nap. Yang Meiji rubbed her fluffy hair, walking downstairs. She seemed to have become stronger. Her body was full of dragon-like muscles. Holding a broom, she walked to the door. She saw Bufang, who was taking a nap. She didn't disturb him, quietly sweeping the snow in front of the door. Bufang, who was taking a nap, had his spirit enter the farmland space. He began to work hard as a pioneer there. Shortly after, the restaurant became lively. Many people entered the restaurant to eat. Yang Meiji and Sorceress and Xing had started to cook in full swing. Bufang woke up. Taking advantage of his free time, his spirit entered the farmland, working hard to cultivate. At this moment, he woke up, feeling much more energetic. His lazy spirit was also awake. It was the same for the next few days. During the day, Bufang practiced cooking. When he was tired, he would enter the farmland to become a pioneer, completing the farmland's development task. When the task was completed, he would receive the system's seed reward. At this moment, Bufang had basically completed the land's development, and he had received several seeds as a reward. Crisp heart cabbage seed, thunderbolt potato seed, path understanding tea tree seed. Bufang silently counted the seeds he had received. They were all strange seeds, and there weren't any high-grade ingredients. This made Bufang feel a little regretful. Bufang had planted the cabbage seed and potato seed in the soil. Although they were just ordinary seeds, Bufang was still a little excited. He was looking forward to seeing what kind of fruit the seeds would have when he harvested them. The ingredients that he had planted with his own hands would be even more delicious. After all, Bufang had personally dug the soil for these ingredients, and the water for watering them was personally brought from the river by Bufang. Bufang had participated in the growth of these ingredients. They all contained Bufang's blood and sweat. Bufang clasped his hands as the wind blew. 80 followed behind him, flapping its wings. This little fellow raised its chicken head, as if it was patrolling its territory, looking really arrogant. Far from them, the fiery heart cabbage that had been planted the earliest had some tender shoots. The tender shoots were like little flames, swaying in the wind. After patrolling for a while, Bufang left the heaven and earth farmland. Little 8, on the other hand, brought Little 3, who was following behind him, and began to strut around the small river. In the river, some blood lobsters popped their heads, waving their big pincers as if they were threatening 80. At this time, 80 would glare, making the blood lobster behind it roar. As the three-eyed wild lion of the ruined prison, Little 3 was a little stronger than a blood lobster. With its wild roar, the blood lobsters would return to the water in fear. 80 was very happy to see that. It stretched its wings, giggling by the river. After staying in the Cloud Mist restaurant for a long time, Bufang decided to bring Ni Yen back to the Valley of Gluttony. No matter what, he needed to study the long-awaited Acheron of Helplessness wine. Ni Yen's wounds were healed. She could use the Heavenly Starcatcher disc, which meant that she could help Bufang use the Scattered Star brewing method to brew wine. Ni Yen patted her chest as if it was a matter of course. Brewing wine. Ni Yen loved good wine the most. If she could help her owner brew wine, how could she not agree? When they knew that Bufang wanted to leave the Cloud Mist restaurant, Yang Meiji and the others were a little reluctant. Sorceress and Xing, on the other hand, felt a little relieved. Recently, Bufang had been too strict with her training. She didn't even have a chance to rest. Now that Bufang was leaving, she heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, she could have a good rest. The Netherworld ship rose up into the sky, rumbling as it flew away. Only Yang Meiji and the others were reluctant to leave. Nangong Wan's eyes were complicated as she watched Bufang leave. She sighed softly. Heavenly Mist City was too small to accommodate Bufang, right? Valley of Gluttony. The Netherworld ship slowly descended, returning to the Valley of Gluttony restaurant. Chu Chongqing had just walked out of the restaurant. He wanted to go to the Phoenix Pavilion next door to get something to eat. He didn't expect to bump into Bufang and the others, who had just returned. Bufang gave him an indifferent look, but he didn't say anything. Chu Chongqing was a little embarrassed. He smiled awkwardly and returned to the restaurant. All of a sudden, he saw an Yen walking behind Bufang. His eyes shrank. The heavenly secret saintess wasn't dead? How could it be? It should be known that several days ago, the Hidden Dragon Heaven Pass had collapsed. Many saint sovereigns of the Hidden Dragon Royal Court were wounded. Now, all the experts had retreated to their holy land. The saint sovereigns of the royal court's holy lands had gathered in the Valley of Gluttony. Without the Great Path's barrier, the Hidden Dragon Continent's power couldn't stop the demons of the Netherworld. Since the first Valley Master had returned, the Valley of Gluttony had become the center of attention. The Great Path's collapse meant that the heavenly secret saintess was dead. Looking at Chu Chongqing's astounded face, an Yen rolled her eyes. She was a little speechless. Bufang didn't say anything. He brought an Yen into the restaurant. Rumble! Rumble! The moment the Netherworld ship landed, the Valley of Gluttony had a terrifying aura surge. A figure instantly streaked across like a shooting star, rapidly landing in front of the Taotai restaurant. The first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony gawked, looking at Bufang as he slowly stepped into the restaurant. His face was astonished. That kid! Why is he here? After the old man appeared, all kinds of powerful auras burst out, dashing toward them. The first one was the heavenly secret Holy Land's Saint Sovereign Mo Tianji. Because he could feel an Yan's aura, it made his hair stand on end. The Great Paths collapsed, but an Yen wasn't dead. What the hell was going on? Inside the restaurant, Bufang and an Yen didn't know what was happening outside. Bufang pulled an Yen to a seat, looking at her with anticipation. He needed her control of the heavenly star catcher disc to brew the Acheron Helplessness wine. The long-awaited Acheron Helplessness wine was about to be brewed. Chapter 896. An Yen looked at Bufang, and Bufang also looked at an Yen. The atmosphere in the restaurant was a little awkward. Chu Chongqing, who saw Bufang and an Yen looking at each other, felt even more awkward. The Lord Go was lying under the Path Understanding tree, sleeping soundly. You had also returned to the Netherworld ship. Cough, cough, Chu Chongqing gently coughed, flicked his silver hair, then turned around and walked to the second floor. After a long time, Bufang, who was still staring at an Yen, slowly opened his mouth. Lend me the heavenly star catcher disc, Bufang said. Okay. An Yen thought for a while, then nodded. She raised her hand and thousands of beams of light moved in her palm. Starlight diffused, turning into a wheel that spun in her palm. An Yen had been studying the heavenly star catcher disc. Now that she had completely fused with it, her control of the heavenly star catcher disc was much better. Seeing this, Bufang's eyes brightened. His mind flickered, and ingredients flew out of his system-dimensional bag. Under Bufang's mental force, the ingredients floated in the air. A leaf of Acheron grass, the flower of helplessness, the star fruit, and other ingredients needed to brew the Acheron of helplessness wine appeared. You control the heavenly star catcher disc. Use the star power to hammer these ingredients, separating the impurities from the essences. Bufang used his mental force to control the ingredients, carefully talking to an Yen. Using the star power to hammer the ingredients, the star power would seep into the ingredients, separating the essences from the impurities, making the wine more mellow. This was the scattered star wine brewing method that the system had mentioned. It was an essential step. Buzz and Yan's face was solemn as she controlled the heavenly star catcher disc. Soon, the ingredients that were swept by Bufang's mental force were sucked into the star compass, spinning together with it. The power of the stars spread, and starlight continuously fell from above, smashing into the astrolabe and bombarding it. Bufang took a few steps back. His face was expressionless, but the ripples in the depths of his eyes revealed the excitement in his heart. That was it. Once the ingredients were processed, he could start brewing the wine. Bufang exhaled softly, and his eyes flickered with emotion. Outside the restaurant, the first valley master of the Valley of Gluttony narrowed his eyes, staring at the restaurant. He had noticed Bufang. He had never thought that the little chef would appear in the Valley of Gluttony. He had been trapped in the Bronze Palace for a long time and had been looking forward to this opportunity for a long time, but in the end it was given to the butterfly by this little chef. He, the first valley master of the Valley of Gluttony, had lost to this kid in cooking. Today, seeing Bufang appear in the Valley of Gluttony, the old man didn't know why he was so happy. Bufang had told him that 3 years later, he would have a great opportunity. However, 3 years wasn't a long time, and many things could happen during that time. The old man had wanted to travel around the entire continent. However, the world had changed, and the great path of heaven had collapsed. The hidden dragon heaven pass was breached, so the old man had to return to the Valley of Gluttony to guard it. The hidden dragon royal court had been defeated by the invaders of the ruined prison. The saint sovereigns were all wounded, so they had to return to the Valley of Gluttony to recover. The old man's dishes weren't just delicious, but they also had healing effects. The saint sovereigns had placed their hopes on the old man. The great army of the ruined prison was invading, and the other holy lands were in danger. Many experts had retreated to the Valley of Gluttony. The old man had to protect the Valley of Gluttony, so he had to return. As soon as he returned, he saw the changes in the Valley of Gluttony. The Valley of Gluttony, which used to be so prosperous, was now so weak. They didn't have any good chefs or experts. The current valley master of the Valley of Gluttony was a little girl who was still wet behind the ears. Of course, the old man could feel a wisp of bloodline power from this little girl, which made him happy. Without a doubt, this little girl was his descendant. I can feel the saintess's aura. Is the saintess still alive? Mo Tianji felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He stared in the direction of the restaurant and strode toward it. However, the restaurant's doors were closed. He couldn't see the situation inside, and he couldn't enter. However, Mo Tianji's instinct told him that the saintess, Yen, was still alive. Bang! Bang! Mo Tianji kept knocking on the door. He couldn't wait to know if Yen was still alive or not. The great path of heaven had collapsed, but Yen was still alive. What had happened? Did Yen get separated from the heavenly star-catcher disk? That was impossible. The restaurant's doors were still closed. Mo Tianji became a little impatient, and he hated that he couldn't smash the doors with his palm. However, he managed to restrain himself. No matter what, this wasn't an ordinary restaurant. It was Bufang's restaurant, which had many mysterious powers. He didn't dare to provoke it. In other words, according to Mo Tianji's deduction, the entire restaurant was shrouded in mysteries, and he couldn't see through it at all. The old man walked to Mo Tianji's side. He clasped his hands, and the tuft of white hair on his head fluttered in the wind. "Little fellow, this old man is here to help you," said the old man. The old man said as he raised his hand. However, before the palm could land, the tightly shut bronze door suddenly opened. With a squeak, the ancient doors opened, revealing a figure. Bufang calmly looked at the two who were about to hit the restaurant's doors. The two instantly felt a little awkward. "Owner Bu." Mo Tianji's mouth twitched, and he retracted his hand. The old man squinted at Bufang. "Little chef, we meet again. The restaurant is closed today. If you want to eat, wait for my notice." Bufang glanced at the two of them and calmly said. Then, with a loud bang, he closed the restaurant's door once again. Mo Tianji and the old man felt a little embarrassed. The two of them were driven mad by the fact that the door was shut in their face. The old man clicked his tongue in wonder. This little chef still has such a personality. Actually, the old man had high expectations for Bufang's dishes. If the chef could defeat his dish, it wouldn't be ordinary at all. That bronze palace only had blood lobsters, and cooking blood lobsters wasn't the old man's specialty. Now that he was back in the Valley of Gluttony, he had so many ingredients to choose from. The old man felt that his cooking skills had improved a lot. He believed that if he could compete with Bufang again, he wouldn't lose. Inside the restaurant, streams of star power smashed down from above, continuously smashing against the slowly rotating star plate. On that star disk, ingredients were placed, and Ai Yan's entire body seemed to be shrouded in starlight. Every time she raised her hand, the starlight disk would spin, and the star power would attack. A leaf of acaron grass was swaying. The patterns on it were really clear, as if it was about to fall off. Light dots diffused from it. Bufang stood far from her, looking at her excitedly. The heavenly star catcher disc was really magical. Boom! A beam of starlight struck, and an ingredient was shaken. It was completely shattered, and a mass of liquid essence floated above the heavenly star catcher disc. Bufang's eyes brightened. An ingredient was processed. Following that, with every rumble, an ingredient would be blasted apart. Once the ingredient was blasted apart, it meant that it had been processed. Bufang pulled a chair, sitting in the restaurant and watching Ai Yan operate the heavenly star catcher disc. Time flew. Shortly, the moon rose and set. The sun rose and set. 1 day and 1 night had passed. The starlight gradually dimmed. Ai Yan was holding an astrolabe in her hand, and there was a wriggling liquid floating in the astrolabe. That liquid was the essence of those ingredients. After a while, Ai Yan opened her eyes. She let out a long sigh, and her fluttering hair drooped down. Bufang stood up, walking to Ai Yan. "Thank you for your hard work." A beautiful smile blossomed on Ai Yan's peerlessly beautiful face. In that instant all the flowers dimmed. "I didn't fail you. When the wine is done, I want to be the first to taste it," Ai Yan said seriously. Bufang nodded. Then, his mind flickered. His spirit sea surged with waves. He rose his hand, using his mental force to receive the star disk in Ai Yan's hand. At the same time, the liquid flowing in it was lifted by him. Carefully holding the star disk, Bufang turned around, heading to the kitchen. Not long after, the skinny figure disappeared from Ai Yan's sight. Ai Yan stretched her body, yawning. Finally, she had fulfilled Owner Bu's request. Being able to help Owner Bu brew wine was something to be happy about. Xiao Lua walked to the door and pushed it open. Bright sunlight shone through the door, bringing with it a wave of winter chill. Mo Tianji, who had been waiting outside the restaurant, heard the sound of the door opening and his entire body trembled. Then, he turned his head and saw Ai Yan, who was stretching her waist and walking out of the restaurant. "Your Highness the Saintess, you're still alive?" Mo Tianji saw Ai Yan with his own eyes. His entire body shivered, filled with disbelief. Ai Yan was a little bewildered. Was it strange that she was still alive? Why did the Saint Sovereign look so dumbfounded? Her memory had been restored, and she remembered everything. Thus, Mo Tianji wasn't a stranger to her. Mo Tianji looked Ai Yan up and down with a look of amazement on his face. He couldn't stop praising her. Then, Mo Tianji's eyes became a little complicated. He didn't know what to say. Ai Yan wasn't dead. He didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Ai Yan wasn't dead, but the great path of the heavenly path had shattered. Without the protection of the great path, the hidden dragon heaven pass had fallen, and the experts of the ruined prison had invaded. However, Ai Yan wasn't dead. How could the great path shatter? From Ai Yan, Mo Tianji felt a familiar aura. It was the aura of the heavenly star catcher disc. His whole body was really a little smeared. Ai Yan didn't mind it. She waved at Mo Tianji, then twisted her body, intending to move a little. She exhaled softly. Ai Yan slowly lifted her feet, the tips of her toes touching the ground. Boom! Ai Yan's body soared up into the sky in just a blink of an eye. A terrifying aura shot out from her body. Mo Tianji was dumbstruck. This speed, this aura, since when did the Saintess have the power of a Saint Sovereign? The moment Ni Yen soared up into the sky in the Valley of Gluttony, flows of terrifying aura shot up into the sky. Those auras were like rainbows, not weaker than Ni Yen's. Then, whistling sounds rang out, and one figure after another rushed out of seclusion. An aura of a Saint Sovereign had attracted the Saint Sovereigns of the great sage realms, who were cultivating in seclusion in the Valley of Gluttony. At the same time, in the restaurant, Bufang carefully placed the heavenly star-catcher disc, which contained the essence of the cooking ingredients, into the wine jar the system had provided. It was a kind of wine jar made of mithril, which could brew the thick aroma of wine. He sealed the jar. Bufang raised one hand, placing it on the jar. A moment later, his hair fluttered, and a dragon roar shook the sky in his spirit sea. Then, his immense, brutal mental energy diffused. To brew the Acheron's helplessness wine, he would use his mental energy to guide the fermentation of the wine. In the Taotai restaurant, as Bufang's mental energy burst out, a beam of light shot up into the sky. The Saint Sovereigns in the Valley of Gluttony shivered. They couldn't believe it. This mental energy fluctuation. It was from a Saint Sovereign expert. Since when did the Valley of Gluttony have so many Saint Sovereign experts? Chapter 897. Black clouds rolled. Thick nether energy instantly covered the entire sky. Within it, there were sounds of thunder and angry roars. Faintly discernible silhouettes slowly floated up into the air. Papilions spread their wings and flew high, carrying the seeds of the mandala tree as they flew across the horizon. Then, papilion eggs fell from the sky one after another, smashing onto the ground of the hidden dragon continent. The mandala tree grew rapidly. Very quickly, it grew into a towering tree, forming many entrances. The ruin prison's army instantly rushed out from the entrances. Black clouds pressed down, rolling and surging. Above the black clouds, figures appeared and moved. The strongest demon king clasped his hands behind his back. Beside him, a group of ruin prison experts followed. Although there were no demon king-level existences, these experts were still the great demon kings of the ruin prison. These demons grinned fiendishly, following the strongest demon king's footsteps, heading toward the native gathering places of the hidden dragon continent. Although the hidden dragon continent's great path had collapsed, there were still remnants. If the demon king-level experts in the ruin prison wanted to enter the hidden dragon continent, they would still be rejected by the great path. Thus, the current ruin prison army did not have other demon kings. There was only the strongest demon king leading them. Because the strongest demon king had stayed in the hidden dragon continent for a long time, he was somewhat affected by the hidden dragon continent's aura. Thus, he was not rejected by the great path. As for the strongest demon king, his eyes were filled with coldness. The chance he had waited for 10,000 years was snatched away by a human. The heavenly star-catcher disc that he had broken with a finger seemed to have recovered. Everything seemed to be against him. This made the strongest demon king's heart restless. He wanted to destroy everything. His mind flickered. Behind him, black energy filled the sky, as though it had turned into a huge, ferocious face. That face roared crazily, leading the strongest demon king and his ruined prison army to slowly approach the Valley of Gluttony. Boom! Ni Yan's aura bloomed. True energy rolled, and starlight bloomed on her body. Her cultivation base exploded in an instant, causing Mo Tianji, who was below, to be dumbstruck. Mo Tianji's cultivation base was strong, but it had not reached the Saint Sovereign level. However, Ni Yen, who was originally weaker than him, suddenly had a cultivation base that he could not see through. The cultivation that had erupted had completely crushed him. What was going on? Mo Tianji's face was filled with speechlessness. He focused his eyes and waved his hand. An astrolabe appeared and he began to make calculations. He stared at Yen and tried to deduce, but in the end, he gave up. The astrolabe in his hand crumbled. Yen seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, and he couldn't see through her at all. Yen let out a long cry. Her hair fluttered in the wind. Her beautiful face seemed to be blooming with a sparkling radiance. She was so beautiful that she looked like a fairy. She stepped on the air and continued to soar into the sky, continuing to ascend. Soon, it floated in the sky. Yen's figure shot out like a meteor and soared in the sky. Her speed was as fast as lightning, and no one could catch a glimpse of her. In the Valley of Gluttony, when they sensed Yen's aura, the Saint's sovereign-level experts who were healing their wounds appeared one after another. They raised their heads to look at Yen, who was soaring in the sky, and revealed surprised and solemn expressions. The heavenly secret Saint Lord's eyes shrank as he gasped. How could this little girl's cultivation base break through so fast? It's only been a while, and she's already at this level? Yen's hair fluttered in the wind. She was so excited. After fusing with the heavenly star-catcher disc, she felt so relaxed. Inside the restaurant, Bufang's mental energy shot out like a stone thrown into a mirror-like lake, creating ripples. Many Saint's sovereigns were startled. With this kind of mental energy, there was no doubt that he was an expert at the Saint sovereign level. It turned out that the hidden dragon continent had another Saint sovereign level existence. Numerous figures shot out and appeared in front of the restaurant, their gazes fixed on it. Mo Tianji was bewildered. The first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony clasped his hands, looking at the restaurant begrudgingly. This restaurant has a Saint sovereign level expert? The ancient Jade Saint sovereign frowned, asking skeptically. Heavenly secret Saint Lord, since when did your Saintess have this kind of cultivation base? Didn't you say that the heavenly star-catcher disc had fused with her? The heavenly star-catcher disc was broken. Why didn't this little girl die? The rising sun Saint Sovereign's muscles bulged. It seemed like a scorching sun was spinning behind him. His bright eyes gazed at the heavenly secret Saint Sovereign. The hidden dragon heaven pass was broken, so they could only retreat to this place. That was because the first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony was even stronger. However, they had never thought that they would see the auras of two Saint sovereign-level experts in this place. With these two Saint sovereign-level experts joining them, perhaps they would have a chance to counterattack. They didn't need to hide in this corner anymore. Some Saint sovereigns were smart. They looked at the restaurant, their eyes bright. They walked forward, preparing to knock on the restaurant's door to see the other Saint sovereign-level expert. However, just when they raised their hands and were about to slap the door, a dazzling and blazing light burst out from the restaurant. The Saint sovereigns were so frightened that they had to take several steps backward. In the next moment, the light dissipated, and a rich fragrance drifted out in spirals. It was a thick, mellow wine aroma, which was as thick as sticky rice soup. What kind of aroma was that? The Saint sovereigns were shocked. They exchanged looks, seeing the astonishment in each other's eyes. Alcade Saint Sovereign was a beautiful woman. She wore a long, golden robe, which made her look noble and gorgeous. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and her eyes shot out light. She wanted to see what was behind the door. However, as soon as her line of sight fell, she felt something in her eyes. Tears couldn't help but roll down her face. Alcade Saint Sovereign was frightened. She didn't expect that she couldn't see through this restaurant. Even her eye technique couldn't see through it. The restaurant became even more mysterious in her eyes. Inside the restaurant, Bufang stood at his original spot. He stretched out a hand and pressed it on the top of the wine jar, sealing the aroma drifting out from the jar. His mental energy was so viscous that it seemed to turn into quicksand, covering the jar of wine. The ingredients in the jar were fermenting at a speed that naked eyes could observe. The heavenly star-catcher disc spun rapidly on the ground. Every time it spun, a drop of liquid would be thrown out. Drop by drop, the liquid would mix with each other, turning into a light green wine. The wine was dripping drop by drop from the wine jar. Eventually, it became the Acheron helplessness wine that Bufang had been waiting for a long time. This wine was as clear as a gem. It didn't have any impurities. Basically, it was made of thick energy. The brewing method was to fuse all the pure energy together. It looked simple, but it required a strict control of mental energy. Every time the mental energy rippled, it would create a drop of wine. The wine was clear and fragrant, just like a piece of silk brushing against one's cheek, giving one an aftertaste. While brewing, Bufang couldn't help but gulp. As the wine was being brewed, light bloomed in the jar. Drops of wine seeped out, congregating together. Eventually, it became a jar of wine. The astrolabe in the wine jar had also completely dissipated due to the exhaustion of its energy. The wine jar the system had provided was a little warm. Bufang held it in his hand. This jar of wine was simple and low-key. Bufang couldn't see the wine inside, so he didn't know how it tasted. The Acheron helplessness wine should be brewed like this. It was different from the traditional wine, which needed to be fermented. This time, the Acheron helplessness wine was crudely brewed. It had fused all the liquids together to create this wine. Outside the restaurant, people kept knocking on the door. Bufang furrowed his brows. He didn't care about those experts. He just stared at the wine jar in his hand, his eyes bright. He exhaled softly. Then, he walked out of the kitchen, holding a transparent goblet made of glass as he walked to the front of the restaurant. The Lord Go was sleeping soundly under the path understanding tree. Besides the Lord Go, Hua had also returned. At this moment, she was sitting cross-legged beside the Lord Go, cultivating with her eyes closed. On the Netherworld ship, Yu sat on the deck, swinging her fair and beautiful legs as she looked at Bufang. Soon, Yu's eyes fell on the wine jar in Bufang's hand. The wine that Bufang wanted to brew was finally done? A black light flashed, and Yu's figure sat on a chair. She raised her head, looking at Bufang with anticipation. Bufang indifferently glanced at Yu, but he didn't say anything. On the upper floor, Chu Chongqing sneakily ran down. His silver hair cascaded as he craned his neck. Seeing Bufang and Yu sitting in the restaurant, his eyes brightened. He licked his lips and walked over. There was a wine jar on the table. It wasn't a beautiful wine jar. It was even a little ugly. The wine jar was covered with many patterns, which changed from brown to green from top to bottom. Old and ugly. This made Chu Chongqing and Yu a little bewildered. Owner Bu had been busy in the restaurant for half a day, and he had made this jar of wine? Owner Bu, this thing looks a little shabby. This wine jar looks really ugly. Chu Chongqing leaned back on his chair, crossing his legs as he spoke. Bufang caressed the warm wine jar, indifferently looking at Chu Chongqing. Do you want to drink wine or eat this wine jar? Asked Bufang. Chu Chongqing was bewildered. He didn't know how to answer. As if he could feel Bufang's confidence, Chu Chongqing became solemn. Perhaps it was an incredible wine jar? The knocks on the door kept ringing. Bufang furrowed his brows, walking to the door. With a squeak, he opened the door. One by one, people rushed in from outside the door and gathered in the restaurant. The old man clasped his hands as he walked in. At first glance, he saw Bufang. That little chef was here, indeed. Then, he saw the wine jar that Bufang had placed on the table. The people who had entered the restaurant were all Saint Sovereign-level experts. They were a little bewildered. There was a whoosh sound. Outside the door, An Yen turned into a jet of light, landing in front of the door. She excitedly ran into the restaurant. Owner Bu, did you finish brewing the wine? As soon as she entered the restaurant, An Yen's eyes brightened, asking excitedly. Bufang looked at An Yen, nodding. Then, his eyes scanned the others in the restaurant, his face emotionless. Since you're all here, please keep quiet. Don't be too surprised if you see or feel anything. The Acheron helplessness is about to be opened. Bufang sat back on the chair, one hand on the lid of the wine jar as he said casually. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.